This is Kevin Wilson with the BM Experts podcast, BM Experts YouTube channel. And I'm very stoked today to have a special guest, a former Marine Corps veteran. All right, wait. We're never former Marines, right? We're just...
No, we're always former Marines, never ex.
Okay. I'm still confused. So a former Marine Corps veteran, stand-up guy, BMX racer, downhill mountain bike guru, and now the brains and the man that drives Stolen BMX. When I had my bike shop in Temecula, California, about 12 years ago, we used to sell a lot of Stolen BMX. So I want to welcome Mr. Dave Wooten to the podcast. Thanks a lot, Dave, for taking the time.
Howdy, glad to be here.
So, if you don't mind, Dave, let me explain how Dave and I came across each other's radar. I had done an interview with the Urban Valor podcast in regards to my Marine Corps service, and during that interview, I talked about a couple different things about my time in the Marine Corps. Some took issue with it, but most were understanding of my Marine Corps service time. And it turns out that a lot of guys came to my YouTube channel from that interview. So we're probably going to have a lot of former Marine Corps individuals on watching the video. So I appreciate you coming by and so forth. So if you don't mind, Dave, where did you grow up? And did you always want to be a Marine, or was this something that you fell into?
I was born in Virginia, and all my family's been there. They've been there since the 1800s. And I was actually born O'Dwyer. My mom and dad got separated when I was very young, maybe like 3. And then my mom ended up marrying Angus Wooten, who was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army. And he did 22 years, and I was like, how do you get out as a lieutenant colonel after 22 years? You know, because like my grandfather was a lieutenant, which is equivalent to a Marine Corps captain in the Navy, and he was a brown water boat commander out in China. My dad was born in China because he was deployed over there. His father was deployed over there, and my mom married Angus Wooten, and I became a Wooten. And he's pretty much the only father I've ever really known, you know. He was already retired by the time he married my mom. But I definitely grew up, you know, in a military household with corporal punishment, the works, you know.
Okay. That was my first question I was going to ask, dude. Was it like make your bed every day and the whole 9 yards?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't very good at that. I wasn't very good at doing the military way at that time. I was, you know, I just wanted to be, you know, Jeff Spicoli or something. I don't know. I just wanted to be laid back, you know, like in my school, I was the only kid that wore like Vans, you know, back in 1980, ordered in the back of BMX Action.
Right.
But he was strict but fair. My mom's actually the one that was more strict. My mom was the one that if I was getting corporal punishment, it was because she was probably the instigator of it. Because
she was involved.
Well, she was, you know, and when there was 4 kids, and then my dad had 6 kids, but most of his kids were already out of the house, so there was really only. And my oldest sister, ran away when she was like 14, so she was only in the house for a little bit. And then my dad's youngest 2 boys, John and Steve, were in the house. And then my dad got in. He was when he got out, he was doing. I was telling you how I thought my dad at first was kind of a shitbird because he was like only a lieutenant colonel after 22 years. He lied about his age and went in when he was 15. He changed his ID to say he was 25. He's 6'2", so he's like, you know, fairly big, but he still, you know, looked like in the pictures I see he had a baby face. But he was in Merchant Marines for 2 years during World War II. Then he went in as an enlisted man because the girlfriend that he was dating got pregnant. Well, she lied about her pregnancy, and then she got really pregnant. So he went in the Army, and he went all the way to E7 before he went the Mustang route and became an officer. So really, it's actually, I think, pretty impressive that he became a lieutenant colonel and, you know, after getting to E7 in the Army. But he
Right.
was in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the very pre-Vietnam, I should say, doing supply for um, the guys on the ground before Vietnam. And he was selling insurance and stocks, I think, when he got out. Then he invested in an oil company in Pennsylvania. When the guy that was running it had some kind of run-in with the law. I think it was taxes, and he couldn't run the company anymore. So my dad had to move us to Pennsylvania. And my mom refused to live in Pennsylvania, as she called it. She wanted something a little nicer. So we lived right across the border in Lakewood, New York. It's on Chautauqua Lake, which is a really nice, like, quaint little town. It's right next to Jamestown, which is a little bit bigger city. I think about 35,000
Dude, I
people.
love Lucy, man.
What's that?
I love
Yeah,
Lucy, dude. Wasn't she from
yeah,
Jamestown?
yeah. She's from Celeron, actually. And actually, it's so funny because they everything. There's a Lucy statue in the Lucy Museum and all that stuff. She got kicked out of Celeron because her brother was such a ne'er do well. He was like shooting stuff in the backyard and shot somebody by accident, like with a gun, and they got kicked out of Celeron. But then when she became famous, she was, the talk of the town. But yeah, so I grew up there, and when we first moved, I hated it because all my family, all my cousins, everybody was down in Virginia, and and they had like really severe winters. You hear about Buffalo winters. Well, Jamestown winters are worse because you get lake
Yeah.
effect from Aqua as well.
Yeah.
But
So did your stepfather, did he push you to join the military? Was it like something that you always talked about, or was it like something that you came home and said, "Hey, I joined the Marine Corps"?
I I guess that I knew I wanted to be in the military from a young age. I thought maybe I wanted to go Army Special Forces because he was the aggressive forces I think it was at Bragg or Benning. He was in charge of the aggressive forces when they were training and they had to like blow up a bridge and stuff. He was in charge of like um, uh, the aggressive forces that stopped them from blowing up the bridge. Um, it always sounded so cool. And then his vice president of his company was a Vietnam Green Beret. And I was always enthralled with their stories. My dad's got so many great stories from, Korea. And I just loved hearing that stuff. So I always played Army when I was a kid. And I kind of thought I was going to go in. And I was going to go Army. And then the Marine recruiter came in 11th grade. And uh, Sergeant Green, I remember. And I thought, man, that guy looks cool. He's in his dress blues and everything, and he seemed really squared away. Now that I look back, he was kind of a shitbird. He couldn't button his dress blues collar, and he always had like a 5 o'clock shadow at 10 a.m. And he just like, and he screwed me over because I had military school and I got two people in the delayed entry program, and I made it out as a private because he didn't fill out any of the paperwork, out of boot camp, I should say. When I saw him, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was considering the Marines. I talked to the Army recruiter. My dad told me, go talk to the Army guy. He said that, the Marines are great. And I mean, my dad, I don't know why, but he taught me the Marine Corps hymn. Like before I even, he would go around singing all the time, like marches and stuff. And he knew the Marine Corps hymn perfectly, better than I do today, I think. And when I started really looking at it, I was like, the Marines are the hardest, to get into as far as, well, you have to have a higher ASVAB than you do the Army or the Navy, but obviously the Air Force, you need a higher ASVAB. But I don't remember, I scored like an 87 or something, and you needed a 105 to get in the Air Force. You needed like a 57 to get in the Marines and a 49 to get in the Army, or something like that. So I could do mostly what I wanted. Then the Marine Barracks happened in Lebanon, and that's when it like really sealed it for me. And I went in the delayed entry program right then, and I was supposed to go the following year, I think in September, and the my D not my DI, my recruiter lied to me and said that I had to go in early, or I probably wouldn't be able to go in because I know now he's trying to make his quota. So I graduated on June 26th, and I was at MCRD Paris Island on June 28th, and started training on the 29th. So
cool.
Yeah, didn't get to go to
Any good boot camp stories, man?
Yeah, I've got a few. One that's pretty funny is that my senior DI and one of the juniors were dipping, and they were spitting in the garbage can, and they, for some reason, called me up to empty the garbage can, and they said, "Wooten, have you ever dipped before?" And I was like, "Sir, no, sir." And I had done it on the bus one time, threw up in the back of the bus, and so they gave me I think it was Levi Garrett plug, if I remember right. They carved it off with a knife, and gave it to me in that big old chaw, I guess they call it, and start building up spit, and they're all spitting in the can, and they're like, I go to spit in the can, and they're like, "What are you doing?" Like they're on the spit, and they're like, "No, spit in our can." So they made me swallow it. That was fun, and
Nice, dude.
I got really, really green, and they saw I was about to puke, and they said, "Take that can with you and dump it out." And I ran to the back, puked, and cleaned out the can, scrubbed it, and puked again. Then another one that's we had this guy, Sergeant Haskell, and he was just different. Like most of the Denton and Goodman, Jasonka, they were pretty decent. Denton was an awesome. Goodman was awesome. Haskell was a pain in the ass. I remember he was, how they get in your face and they got their cover and they're like pushing back. I had enough and I pushed back and his cover buckled. Like it just pooped. I don't think I was going to ever get off that quarter deck. And then he did a pivot and step on my hand and broke my pinky. And, so I went and to the BAS. He sent me to BAS and he said, how'd you hurt your pinky? And I said, I stubbed it, sir. Went there and had a stubbed pinky. I had a little thing on it for a little while. I can't really do anything for it. But that guy ended up getting recycled. And he got recycled. When I say that, he got sent to receiving because the senior caught him. Somebody had left their locker open. Normally, when you leave your locker open, they dump it and you go searching for all your shit around the squad bay. Not him. He sat down in the locker and read the kid's letters home. And Sergeant Denton caught him and fired him. I was glad because that guy was a shithead.
How many times did you go through the gas chamber? Once?
I think just once. I did it there, and then
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was that?
I think every time I hear it, because I thought it was just us, where they put extra tabs in, and you're like, really just, it's not nice, It was, they make you sing the Marine Corps hymn, and they, make you say your general orders, whatever, with your gas mask off, then put it back on, and it was not nice. It was a permanent one. Some of the ones that they did, later it was like a little trailer that they pulled up, like in the grunts or in training school, I think.
They made me do it 4 times. I went through and I took my mask off, and the DI says, "Breathe." I go, "Breathe," and I go, and he slugged me in the stomach, and I breathed, and everything came out, and they have a picture of me running out of the Quonset hut, and then the DI goes, go back in, get back in line. So I went back in line. I did it perfectly. I got out and I did it 4 times, and I was standing in line for the 5th time, and my senior DI goes, what the hell are you doing in line? What are you so pissed off about, Wilson? I go, sir, this is a private's 5th time in the gas chamber. And he goes, go ahead and get back in line, dude. Don't worry about it. That was my after that, I got to like the gas, dude. It was kind of like a sweet type of. It didn't bother me at all. So every time after that, when I was in the fleet, I went to the gas chamber. I was like, oh, dude, no problem, dude. This is easy, man. I like this stuff, dude. So it's kind of funny, man. So when you got out, you went in '84.
I went in '84, and I
you
went
got out in '88.
I got a hernia in boot camp, and this is at the beginning of 3rd phase, I think, and they wanted to like do the operation and then sit around on PI for a month, and then I think it was at the end of 2nd phase is what it was, and they were gonna make me start 2nd phase again. I'm like, nah. And so I signed a waiver. It was inguinal hernia, so my intestines went into my ball sack, and so I ended up getting operated on Beaufort, right outside of Parris Island, right after boot camp, and then I went home.
Where'd you get orders for?
I got orders for infantry training at Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
So I did go to boot camp at PI, and I did hump Mount Motherfucker. So I did both.
I never did that. I never did Mount Motherfucker, dude.
No, did you go to PI or?
I went to MCRD, and then I went to ITS at Pendleton, but for some reason we never did Mount Motherfucker.
Oh, that's funny. I remember the one thing I remember about Mount Motherfucker is it smelled like CS gas, and I always thought it was because they were doing like mock battles out there or something with CS and whatnot. And then years later, I was living in California, I think in '97 or something, before I moved to Amsterdam, and that I smelled the smell, and it's actually a plant that smells just like CS. Maybe it's where they get it from. I don't know, but you can smell it like plainly when you're riding out in the like little low areas, So I went to ITS, and then they selected, from what I understand, they select the top 10%, and then they send you either to C school or barracks duty. And I guess barracks duty, if you have a waiver, you can't go to C school because you're guarding special weapons. And you can't have a waiver like a drug waiver or a height waiver or anything, I guess. But that's not necessarily true. The height waiver must be okay because there was a guy who's like 4'9" in C school. But went to C school, got selected for the Kennedy Mardet in Virginia Beach, and did that for 2 years. And that, from when you got there, you got G-forced, which is the code red or blanket party. One of the first nights you're there, by the entire Mardet. Mardets are pretty small too. They're like 60, 70 Marines, including officers and NCOs. But we were the first new guys they had seen in a long time, like in a year and a half. So they really went to town on us, And then command changed, and we got a new officer and a new first sergeant Terry. And this guy, huge dude, big dark green Marine. I just remember his pinky. He gave me his pinky ring. He said, "Try this on," and I'd like, but I put it on my thumb, and it was still loose on my thumb, and that was his pinky ring. Big old. And I was one of his favorites and least favorite, I guess. They had abused us so badly that some of the NCOs filed a request mass, and it went all the way to Al Gray. And he was Atlantic Fleet commander at the time.
Yep.
And he came on our ship, everything. And I refused to testify because I was one of the people like that. I was a bit of a knucklehead sometimes, and they had the drug dog in the Mardette before we're getting ready to deploy. I think down to Cuba, and they, my buddy's like, "Oh, do your dog bark," and I did a really good dog bark at the time, and I started doing it. And the dog went crazy. Then one of these guys narked me out. So now, and it's the way I looked at it's my own fault. I had a dog bone on a necklace, and they
Mm-hmm.
made me wear it for like a week, and I had to bark at reveille, waking everybody up, and I had to howl at tabs, and then another time I punched a E5 sailor because he was being a dick, and
Wow.
yeah,
So
but I
you know that I
charged.
guarded nukes when you were in port.
Oh, that's what you did?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you guys used to pull them, when we used to do moves from the docks, we used to take them to our unit, and we guarded them when they were on land. And
Oh,
so that's funny how our paths kind of cross a little bit, where you were on the
yeah,
guard them on the ship, I was guarding them on the ground, and
yeah,
that was we'd go in there for 2 or 3 days at a time, and then come back out again. And when I first got orders to Norfolk, I was crying in the airport, thinking, "Oh my God, my life is over, dude! Like, I'm going to the middle of nowhere." And the first night I'm there, I go to the Mar Bar at the barracks, and I get laid. And I'm all, "This is the greatest place in the world, man! I love it, man."
I didn't
So
mind it. I didn't mind it. There's a lot of like with Virginia Beach, the beach. Um, we used to have the Gunge Mobile. We called it. It was this Dodge Ram Charger, and we'd all pile in there. And I can still remember like driving down Virginia Beach Boulevard, drinking, and we all had our different methods. This guy Thomas would take a 40 and just down it, and that was his way of doing it. Guimond, I can still remember, he used to have these raps that he put on, and they'd say like Pepsi instead of Pepsi,
right,
and I would put it in a coffee cup, a coffee tumbler, and we'd be drinking and going down there, listening to the music on the, I had a good stereo in it and everything. And I still remember like we got stopped at a stoplight, because the cops were just sitting there, and he said, "What you drinking, boys?" And Guimond says, "I'm drinking Pepsi." Like this, has his thumb over the eye, just, and like I used to see so many shows there. I saw uh, uh, the Ramones, Suicidal Tendencies, The Cure, like all
dude.
these.
Oh, I can't believe you missed Suicidal, because I tell my kids, we used to go down Virginia Beach Boulevard, and I used to see Social Distortion. Social Distortion playing at this dive bar in Virginia, and I was like, "What's Social Distortion?" And then now they
Yep.
blew up. I tell my kids, "Dude, I could have seen Social Distortion so many times. They were playing at a bar. It was
Yeah,
crazy,
that's
man." So yeah, there was a lot of places
yeah,
out there, right?
and I like a lot of the little places there. It's like it is a stop for sure, but it's not well advertised. So sometimes you just stumble on stuff, and there was no internet or anything. You know what I mean? So you either had to know. There's no website, and you just had to either know or see it the week before. I mean, how many times that we went somewhere, Raleigh or something like that, to see somebody, and it had happened the week before. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was good. So then I went from there, and we did a med tour.
Okay.
Um, Gaddafi was acting up with Libya and all that, and that was a great tour. I think it was 7 months, and we started off in Rota, Spain, and in Spain we hit Benidorm, Palma de Mallorca, Rota, Morocco across the way. And then we hit France. We hit Toulon, Nice, Cannes. Italy, we hit Trieste a couple times, which is up near Yugoslavia. Then we went to Yugoslavia, which is now Slovenia. and got to have um, got to go to the Vatican with the Swiss Guard there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all the Catholics got to have mass with the Pope. Um, then we did Naples, um, somewhere else, Rome, obviously, and then Israel twice. And they, Mickey, my birth father, died when I was deployed. And because I was in the PRP, Personnel Reliability Program, I could either take 2 weeks off and buff the Mardet and Captain's passageways, or they could send me home. Worst, best decision ever. So I went home. They took me to Rota. Then I got on a C5. I was the only passenger on a C5 flying to Delaware, and then ended up, and I wouldn't even go to the funeral because I didn't really know the guy. And my mom made me go. So I went down and drove my brother down to Virginia, then drove back, partied with my buddies for a week, and then had to go back over. On the way back over, they don't tell you, because it's top secret, where your ship is or going to be, only where it is now. And so I traveled around for a couple of weeks trying to find my ship, but I got to go to I think it's Aviona Air Force Base, Sigonella, Sicily, Athens, Greece, like all these other places that none of my buddies have been. And I got to go there, and I just you know, I was only a lance corporal, but they didn't mess with me. They just like released me. I didn't have to do working parties. The only place I had to do working parties, and I was in charge, was I think in um, Dover, where I was there waiting to catch a new plane over there. And but other than that, I just floated around, got to see these places. I met a girl in an Air Force girl uh, up in Italy, and so that was a fun time. Sicily was crazy. It was just like a crazy town. Or Sigonella. And then I caught my ship while I was in Athens. I count Athens as a place that but all I saw was the airport for 2 or 3 days. I had to sleep in the airport. I had to shower in the airport, and I wasn't allowed to leave. I'd go outside just to like see things. But then they picked me up on a helo and took me out to the Kennedy, and I got to see the largest gathering of ships since World War II. And I was flying over top of it. It was just ships as far as you could see. And what it was for is they did a show of force, and we went across the line of death in Libya into the I think it's the Gulf of Sidra, and SEALs drove a Israeli cruise liner out into there, and then all the people, I guess, bombed the crap out of it. You
Hmm.
know, that was kind of, it was cool just to fly and see it. And then, you're landing on a helicopter, and the Marines always go as an escort for people getting off, whether it's the mail or whatever. And there I am getting off, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And because normally when you leave a service like that, I know many people that have left, like the Kennedy, you don't come back. They you leave, you think you're coming back, and then they just pack your shit up and you're off to the grunts. And so I feel kind of blessed that I was able to go back and finish the cruise.
Nice. So, what is
Yeah.
it like when you get your orders? Because all your buddies, I know for me, when I was on barracks duty, all your buddies are falling. Every couple of weeks, someone gets orders, someone's stressed out. Um, we were considered barracks babies. You guys, I don't think you guys had that same moniker. But what was it
No,
like when you finally got your orders? You're like, oh, were you hoping for like the East Coast or West Coast, or you didn't care? What was it like?
I think I put in number 2 is Hawaii because I know they don't pick number 1. I picked first Pendleton, then Hawaii, and then Lejeune. And of course, I got Lejeune. And I wanted to go to Hawaii because it just looked like, I mean, surfing and swimming, and it just looked like a great duty. My understanding is it was like dependent on the unit, but it could be good duty. Um, I think the biggest thing was because of the shit command and the command that was relieved, it made us really tight. I mean, you do the minor infraction. They'd put your card up, your Liberty card up on first sergeant's wall, and
Well,
you wouldn't even
you talk about the Marine detachment. You talk about 3-2.
Marine detachment, Marine detachment. So I was ready to go, but I really had a lot of buddies there. Pretty much everybody, that I came with was going to Lejeune. So when I left, I didn't remember this. So one of my buddies got out. We went to ITS together, C School together, Kennedy together, and now we're going to 1-6 together. And I don't remember this because I met up in he ended up in fifth group after the Marines. He ended up going in the Army and went right into fifth group and retired out of there. And he's still like a contractor going over there for Raytheon and whatnot. We met up out in Barstow because he was out training some DoD people. He's a medic, and I was like, oh, and I was telling him, I said, I remember I went to 1-6, and then I had to do the sea bag drag over to 3-2 because 1-6 was deployed, and they were like, oh, we don't need any O311s. He's like, oh, you don't remember, huh? I was like, remember what? He's like, you didn't do the sea bag drag, and I was like, didn't. And he's like, no. He said, you flew to Indiana from New York. And then we drove down to 1-6 because we were both going there at the same time. And then we both got turned away from 1-6 and sent over to 3-2. He was sent into 3-2 Kilo, 0311. Yeah.
My alma mater, man.
Yeah, I had a bunch of I know Kennedy because he was a couple months after me, and he would have been corporal over there with Kilo. So we ended up going to 3-2, and they didn't need so many 0311s, so they put me as an 0341, which I guess I didn't realize it until I was going through my medical. I was looking for medical records, but I was going through my military records, and actually was MOS'd 0341, and I think 0861, which is a forward air controller. I was a forward observer for 3-2 Lima. This is a good story. I'm not a mortarman, but I'm the senior lance and then a corporal. And so I'm the senior guy there, but don't know anything about the gun. So I don't think I'm good at, math, right? I failed every math class in high school ever. And so I don't want to be FDC with fire direction control or whatever it is. So they're like, oh, we'll make you FO. Well, that's even more math. I mean, I think it's trig and all kinds of stuff, but I just didn't know it was called that. So I was able to absorb it. And the way the Marine Corps teaches, way different than school,
So did you have to carry the base plate or the barrel?
I carried, well, when we did the McCrest Force March, I carried my rifle and 2 donkey dicks, which are the big steel poles. I remember we stopped. My hands were frozen like this. I couldn't open my hand when we stopped for a break.
So there is 81 millimeters, and what's the smaller one?
60. That's what we were 60. I was in Lima weapons platoon, and so there was a sergeant there, a real cool sergeant named Gore. I think maybe he was weapons platoon leader, something. He said, all right, we're going to go. We got the McCrest coming up, and we're going to shine. So we went and checked out the Mule, which is the big laser with the big tripod that out, and went out to the range on a Sunday, I think it was. And I made my range card, lased every target, every possible target, troops in the open, because they'd have barrels or whatever. They'd have an actual tank out there. They'd have a BMP looking thing, like Jeeps, a lot of different kinds of stuff. So I lased every target, made a range card. A week later, we had the McCrest. And I don't know how Sergeant Gore knew this, but I was actually in the same stand that we practiced on. And I don't know if he knew it or just got lucky. So I'm watching the guy and I'm just kind of like sitting there making notes and I'm looking at my range card, and comes my turn to do it. And I, FDC, this is FO, fire mission over, but and go through my whole thing. And they fire one HE round and it goes in. There's a hole where the turret would normally be, goes right in the hole. And I just say fire for effect. Next thing, it was like perfect, right? I got a meritorious mass for it, for winning the Macress. And yes, I cheated. But I was good anyway. But that opened up some doors for me. I started getting attached to units and stuff as an FO. I then, when we deployed to the Philippines, they sent me to an Anglico school. It was just me, my lieutenant, and SEAL Team 3, and the Anglico guys. And we would stay on this finger at night. SEAL Team 3 guys would come in via Zodiac every day for the class, and then we called in naval gunfire off the I don't remember what ship it was. It was an older ship that they had unretired, I guess. And that looks like a Volkswagen bus going down range when you see it. And it just, you got to open your mouth from the impact and the whole earth just shakes. Then we called 500-pound bombs off of A6s, learned how to do that with the same mule laser guidance system. Now they got something they mount on the side of your scope, I think. It was just, that thing was, I think, 45 pounds just for the laser back then, And that was an awesome, awesome school. That was fun.
I was a saw gunner, and one time we were on a hump in Okinawa, and for some reason I had the saw, I had a extra barrel, and then they gave me the 81 millimeter base plate, dude, and I was like, oh man, that was a rough hump, bro. Those base plates and those barrels are heavy as hell.
Yep.
And I remember we were out there and they fired off a line charge. You ever see one of those things go off?
No.
Those are sick, dude. And they fired off a line charge and stuff like that. And that's when that's when the guy that I was with, he got we had the training mistake where the guy got shot. And I told a story about that before on my interview, but yeah, dude, that's dude, I wouldn't want to be in mortars. Well, I guess it's kind of cool if you're in wartime where you're not on the front line, you're back a little bit. At least you have a little bit of time to hide before you get to the enemy, right?
We 3-2 was like, you talked about in your post and whatnot, the guy from Kilo that got left out at CAX, right?
Yeah.
I was already out. I think my buddy Kennedy maybe got out before or just after that. But it was like the guys, sergeants that were brought up on charges, whatever, were like, it was his unit, same as yours, I think. That wasn't the first thing. When we were in the Philippines, we were on Green or Blue Beach, something like that. There's one of the beaches, and we were doing, I think, L-shaped ambush, and they had all these 55-gallon drums that were supposed to be filled with water, and that was what we were assaulting. So they got the M60s here and the riflemen here. M60s are laying down a base of fire, and I'm up on a finger here. So I had already called fire mission, and they had me call the fire mission, and then they had me call it danger close, which you don't do in training. Now, they were protected by like a little wall that they were hiding behind, and I don't remember. They had me call it danger close, but I don't remember if it was actually danger close. I don't remember what the number is, but they were only like 75 meters away from it. So we call in. I'm training this other guy, I think Acevedo, and we drop it in there. Then the 60s fire, and we're sitting up there, and I'm getting my binos, and I'm just like watching, and I hear it. I'm like, man, the bees are really bad up here. And then I see the dirt dance up, like poop at my feet, poop. And I said, they're shooting at us. And so we run, and there's like a log on the top, and we just kind of lay down because I'm just in like a boonie cover, and I don't have my flak or helmet on. You know, I was too cool for that. And I'm like, fire up the flare. And he's like, oh, I left it down there. I said, well, call ceasefire over the radio until they hear it. Oh, I left it down there. Waited until they were done. And so they're firing base fire. And these guys, the O3s assaulted through, right? So apparently what happened is in the 55-gallon drums, they put in rocks instead of water. So it was just hitting and
ricocheting
off. And so called down there. I'm like, hey, can you move the base of fire, 180 degrees? Because we're taking impact up here. So they go and they move the base of fires. 60s are here, O3s are here. Lay down the base of fire. I can see all the stuff. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Because hitting and skipping up, you see every tracer round going up into the mountaintop next to us or across from us. Then the O3s do the assault through. Now I'm watching. It's hitting and flying down into the bivouac. And you see all the negritos, the Filipino people that are preparing food. When we're done, they try to sell you like lumpia and rice or whatever. And it's going on in there. And so pop up that flare, call ceasefire, pop a flare. And I told Acevedo to keep on calling ceasefire, and I start running down the hill towards the encampment. And Acevedo, I think it was Acevedo, I don't know, he's a Latino name, but with an A. And he calls down that, and then somebody down there calls down that we have, can't remember if he said troops hit or something like that, but they ended up shooting 2 Filipinos by accident. And so they get them out on a helo. CO leaves, Gunny gone, and I don't know. My memory is kind of crap with the grunts for some reason, but I don't know if they were relieved or what, if anything ended up happening.
Civilians do not realize how often training mistakes happen in the military, alone the Marine Corps?
Oh, the med cruise we did? 9 people died on that cruise.
9 people died?
9 people died. I think one was a purple shirt. One I saw personally, and I carried him. It was a Master Chief, big old fat turkey, and he had a heart attack in the Chief's berthing. And so whenever they have a heart attack or anything, medical alert comes over the 1C, and we run down, and it's 4 of us, and we're litter bearers. So we carry anybody going to BAS or being offloaded, whatever. And so we're watching the whole fiasco. And we were there before the medics were. And this guy's just fighting for his life. And so they're like, oh, get him the adrenaline shot. And the guy goes and is like, it's not here. And they don't have the things to shock him. So they run to BAS and grab it. And they go to shock him, but they don't have the gel. They forgot the gel that goes with it. And the guy just passed right there. And
wow.
I was like sitting there watching. I was just like, this is the first time I saw a guy die in front of me. And I'm just like, everybody else stood up and they're like, all right, Marines, come get me. Everybody else stood up before me and grabbed an end. So I'm stuck with the head. And this guy puked all over himself. So I got to pick up his sweaty puked head and put him in a body bag, then put him on the gurney. And we took him up to the refrigerator and put him on top of the apples. I just remember telling her, like, don't eat the apples, bro.
Oh, God, man.
Yeah.
Hey, not to change the subject, but was it true in PI that you could get laid for a Snickers bar? Is that true?
I don't think it's that extreme. Maybe if you're like with little kids or something, I don't know. But
PI closed by the time I got to the fleet, but we heard stories that if you had a Snickers bar in the Philippines, you could get a prostitute for the night. So
I
that's
can't
true or
say that
untrue?
for sure, but I can say that if you went out with about $25, I remember they had like this place that had a burrito, and it was about like this huge burrito. And then you go out and get drunk. They had Red Horse and San Miguel beer. And then there was another drink that was called Bullfrog, or Bullfrog was like a lemonade kind of drink. And then there was another one called Mojo. And I had a T-shirt at one time that had the recipe for Mojo on it. It was like half pint of brandy, half pint of this, half pint of that, a Sprite, a beer, Calamasi, which I think is star fruit, like all this stuff. I remember, it's a hot day, and I bought a pitcher of it. I'm sitting there drinking it, and I finished the pitcher, and I'm like, I don't even think I feel anything, And then I stood up and was all like, like as soon as my blood started flowing, I barely made it to the bathroom. But you can, for $25, have a really good time there, I can tell you. And it's, it's definitely one of those things, like the bars are there. There's nightclubs, and I think you got to pay like a bar fine, and you got to pay for you got to pay the girl. And I know from experience, my buddy, he took a girl out and she didn't want to sleep with him. He paid her, but they have to like you, I guess. I don't know. But
Dude, that story reminds me of Korea. We floated into Pohang one time, and have you ever heard the soju? Have you heard of this stuff?
yeah,
Where it has opium in it or whatever, and
yeah.
they're little teeny bottles, and it tastes like Kool-Aid. And I drank one, and my buddies were like, "Dude, be careful, be careful." I'm like, "Dude, I feel fine, man. I feel fine." And give me another one, and I drank another one, and I ended up being face down in a Korean gutter for the entire night. And this is back when you had to when you came back on ship, you had to salute and ask permission to come aboard. I don't know if they still do that or not.
Yeah, they do that. That's a real long Navy tradition.
So I had all I had to do was walk up the gangplank and get past the guard at the hatch, and then I was good. So I was like, permission to come aboard. They go, okay. And I went in and I passed out, and I still tell people that story today where it's like, dude, that soju stuff will sneak up on you, bro. You gotta be careful, like the opium and stuff in it. I think that they took the opium out now, but
well, you had in Okinawa, you had that habu sake. Remember that? It had a snake in it, and the habu poison. If you go when you go off base, there's like you'll see it up there, and generally, like it's a jar with a snake inside. And after you get drunk, you have like in the Philippines, you eat balut, which is like an egg that's buried for
balut, yeah.
Yeah. But I've never had it when I wasn't drunk, or the monkey meat.
No way, dude.
Yeah, but the habusaki was one of those things, man. That was like a hallucinogen. I don't know if it's legal anymore, but yeah, I think I probably I've lost some memory cells from some stuff.
So how many years you were only in for 4 years, but after you were in the fleet, you went somewhere attached to a SEAL company or a recon platoon or something like that. What happened with that? How'd
Oh,
that happen?
that was scouts. Yeah, so I got out, wanted to grow my hair long and not have any standards, and I did an entire summer, and I sold back 45 days leave, and did an entire summer where I did nothing but like ride my bike, drink, watch movies. And
What kind of bike?
at the time, it was a Colnago, was my road bike.
Road bike. Okay.
I had a GT. Can't remember what the model was. It was just a freestyle bike, and then
I'm sorry. You got out. You were riding your bike and you're drinking.
drinking and watching movies, catching up on the movies that you missed. You know what I mean? And then I kind of got that thing where I was missing like the camaraderie, the esprit de corps, and I went and uh, went to see the Marine Recruiter. I was like, thinking about going in the reserves. And the only reserve thing that they had at the time, the only billet they had was some kind of grave marker specialist or something. And I was just like, no, I don't know what that is, but don't you have anything like more interesting than that? And they're like, no. So I went over and talked to the Army, or what I thought was the Army, and it ended up being the National Guard. And they terror, type stuff. And so they put me on this, it was the counter-terror unit for the World University Games. And it turned out to be total BS. It was just a bunch of cops collecting a paycheck. There were MPs. We didn't do any training besides NBC, cleaning weapons, like no clearing, nothing. It was just the most boring thing ever. I did that for 6 months, which I think was my obligation. And then I put a transfer in to the Scouts, which was 101st Cavalry, something like that. But it wasn't mechanized Scouts. It was, we did have Humvees, you know what I mean? But it wasn't, you get out of the thing and we're like, doing stuff. And we'd go to Fort Drum, work with 10th Mountain, stuff like that. And that was pretty cool. There's,
So you got out as what, a corporal, or were you EAS for the first time? Corporal or Lance?
yeah, corporal.
Okay.
And then when I crossed over, I wanted to be a corporal, and they're like, no, we don't. The corporal's more like a technical thing. Like if you're an aircraft mechanic or something, I don't know exactly, but they made me a specialist. But you're not an NCO. The E4 is not an NCO. Like you're not a platoon leader or a squad leader or anything there. You're just a guy.
Uh-huh.
And that wasn't a big deal. I think 2 months after I transferred over to Scouts, they had a promotions board, and they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, "Oh yeah." So I got meritoriously promoted to sergeant after 8 months in the Army.
So how long did you do total in the National Guard?
That's kind of iffy. I'll get to that. So I when I was there, I had my B billet, same as in the Marines. When I was in the Marines, I would take anything I could do. Go to water safety survival instructor school, flight deck guidance, flight deck safety, firefighting. And one of the things I did was as a PMI, primary marksmanship instructor. And we did that over in, I think it's Dam Neck or Little Creek, one of those. And what we were doing is PMI for the Navy qualifications.
Marksman here, dude.
Yeah.
Lifelong marksman.
I'm 3-time expert. First time marksman, though I was expert going into qualification, and then the seniors like, what is wrong with you? You're like my hope for series high, And I just wouldn't. And so he stopped me from qualifying, took my weapon, they took it to the armory, and found that somehow, they stack all the weapons up. Mine might have been on the bottom and it bent the barrel. So then they made me qualify again, and they gave me 3 rounds to zero that rifle. And the senior's like standing over, he's like, come up 2, right 1, so I ended up getting high marksman, almost sharpshooter, and then every time after that I did expert. But so I'm a PMI for the Army National Guard. They had this huge class that I taught, and I shot a perfect score in the Army, both UKD and KD course, known distance and unknown distance. Like in the Army, they have this thing that'll just like pop up over here and then pop up there, and you don't know what the distance is. So I was just using Kentucky windage, and hit everyone because you knock it down, and that's how they score it. So they had me teach this class, and I brought the class up to 87% expert, and they gave me a governor's award for that. One of the people that I trained, because we used a different thing. Besides classroom, we also used a thing called the what's it called? Weaponeer, and it's a M16 that has these little targets that are like this big that pop up, and I have a little screen, and I'm watching the people, and I can see if they're doing figure eight or if they're breathing problem or whatever. It's actually pretty cool. And after I got out of that, or no, I think I was maybe I was still no, I was out. I was out, and my girlfriend at the time says, somebody's on the phone for you. They say with the FBI, and I'm like, it's my brother Mike. He was always like joking around like that, right? So I go in there and say, what's up, Mike? And he's like, no, not Mike. This is Special Agent Hickens, whatever, I don't know his name. And I'm like, oh, hey. And I was like, that's not my brother's voice. So, and he starts querying me about Timothy McVeigh. Yeah, I watched the news. I know he did the Oklahoma City bombing, him and Terry Nichols. And he's like, that's right. And he said, do you remember him? And I'm like, never met the guy. I don't know him.
Whoa. Okay, so this is going to get interesting now. Okay, break it down, bro.
So I'm like, no, I never heard of him. And he's like, well, you served with him. And he was in mortars and you were in scouts. And I'm like, okay. He said, you would have, he was the radio man for them. You would have talked to him on the radio doing fire missions. I'm like, no, it doesn't ring a bell. And he said, have you seen his picture? And I said, yes. And he's like, so you would recognize him? I said, yeah. I still recognize him today. You know what I mean? Who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay, thank you. A day or two later, calls again. He says, he was in your class for primary marksmanship instructor. Are you sure you don't remember him? I'm like, I do not remember him, no. Calls back a couple days later. You trained him personally on the weaponeer. And I'm like, no, don't remember it. And I said, do you ever think maybe the problem is he wasn't memorable and wants to be, And didn't really think about it. And then when I was getting ready to move to Amsterdam, I was going through all my stuff, throwing away whatever I didn't need, putting the rest in storage. And I got those little green monsters. And I looking through and it's like, oh, what weaponeer, Sergeant blah, 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 PFC, blah, blah, or whatever, going through all the different people. And there's Timothy McVeigh, needs more training.
This is getting clipped out. This part of the video is going to be clipped out, bro.
Right. But so then with that unit, I got selected for, so the Guard at the time in New York was doing drug interdiction with the DEA. So it was a program they paid, and we'd go and get our ghillie on, because I was in the Army, I was a sniper, and we'd get our ghillie on and go just like watch a freaking pot field, make notes. Weren't allowed to be armed. I carried a pistol underneath my blouse, but just watching this stuff, that was boring as hell. Then because of my PMI stuff, they asked me, this guy, Major Jordans, he was somebody, I guess, in the whole SWAT community. He ran the whole SWAT meet in Fort Drum. And I helped him write the long range program and some of the scenarios that they would go through. And then they asked me to go up and work with SWAT snipers. And they give me a Humvee, and I just go up there for the day, and then come back in the Humvee. And
these are Army snipers, right? Not Marine Corps snipers.
Army, yeah. I was an Army sniper. I was a Marine Corps sniper. I was a Ford observer. But the the Humvee was cool. I remember one day I went, I worked in a bike shop, raised bikes in Buffalo, and I went to pick up my paycheck on the way to go do this training. And I come out, get my paycheck, and I come out, and the Humvee's gone. It's just like disappeared. And so I go in, running in. I'm like, "Where's Ray, the boss? He's Ray's bikes, right?" And he's like, "I don't know." He and this guy Tommy took off in my Humvee, and they come back like 30 minutes later, and they're driving around, and Tommy's up in the turret, like spinning around,
Whoa. So you were working at a bike shop while you were in the Army, and you drove the Humvee to work?
Yeah, just pick up my paycheck.
I thought you were talking about an Army paycheck. Okay, your bike shop paycheck. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
The Army, it was just I was a weekend warrior at that point.
Okay.
Weekend a month, whatever, and then 2 weeks every year. And that was that was pretty funny. But that DEA job was pretty cool. Like we got to do room clearing with MP5s. That was like a lot of fun. Teaching the guys. I was trying to have them 0 at 25 and go out to 300, which is the Marine Corps standard. And they're like, "We'll never take a shot over 75." So I'm like, "Well, if you can hit it at 300, you can hit it at 75, no problem." We did some cool stuff like those fire towers. We got to shoot from the top of the fire tower because they never shot downward angle, and just trying to work out the math for that on that for them. And so this job was supposed to be $300 a day if I took a contractor's job, which I was going to do. And so I would still do my regular Army stuff, but then go do this. And this guy Galrin was in charge of it, and it was like really it was going to be a cool program, And then this guy Shitmill, or his real name was Whitmill, he took over the unit and shut me down because we didn't. When I was fresh to the unit, I just made sergeant, and he was a E7 or E8, and he was teaching an NBC class. And at the time, was it Desert Storm, the first one's going down, and it's like, so they're really ramping up NBC, and so it's important to get it right. And I'm just off I'm less than a year from active duty, and he's like telling to, "Oh, okay, you see gas, you smell gas. First thing is gas, gas, gas," and that's like so 1984, like that had changed by the time I got to the grunts. Whereas you don and clear your mask and yell gas, because otherwise you're going gas, I'm dead, And I said, "Hey, Sergeant Whitmill, that's kind of old, you should don and clear your mask and then say gas." And he's like, "Well, I'm reading right from the manual." And so I'm like, I go up and I flip over the manual, and it says nuclear, biological, chemical warfare, blah, 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 1973. And I don't think he much liked that I called him out on that. And well, I know he didn't. And so I didn't get that job. And you were asking me when I got out. I had a contract so I went in 89. And then I did my time. I was up for E6. And I've been put in for that governor's medal and doing this thing. But now I went back to my regular. And they kept on trying to. I was a sniper team leader, and they kept on trying to have me take over as the platoon leader for the scouts. And I'm like, "No, I want to be." And he's like, "No, you're too senior." And I'm like, "I'll train somebody, and I'll be the spotter." You know what I mean? And like, but they just kept on trying to do this. They're fighting me every inch, but I didn't be in charge of people, And my sister gets picked up for interstate drug trafficking. My older sister, from Pennsylvania to New York or Virginia to Pennsylvania or somewhere. I don't know what. She has 3 kids. My mom and dad are taking the oldest son. My brother is taking the middle son, and they asked me to take the youngest son. You know, I don't know, 24. I'm like not ready to be a dad yet. I'm basically a child myself. I feel like. But so I called up Sergeant Whitmill is in my direct chain of command. So I call him at his work. He was a meat cutter at the supermarket. I called him and I called him at command and left messages everywhere because nobody answered. Where'd you go?
I'm here. Can you see me?
No.
You can't see me anymore? Oh, crap.
You just fucked out.
Oh, great. So keep talking. You can hear me, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So I'm sorry to everybody.
He goes and we're supposed to leave for Fort Drum for our 2 weeks. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make it. If I can make it, I'm going to be late. And I take off to go pick up my nephew. And I get back and they're talking about charging me with missing movement. I was like, oh. Well, I told them what happened, and they said there's no message on the machine, which means he erased it. That he didn't get any message from me at work or at home. And I was like, okay. So I just was like, fuck it, and just stopped going. And they end up at first giving me a general discharge under honorable conditions and reduced my rank to private. Then my rank went back up because they couldn't take away, I guess, the Marine Corps rank, and I got an honorable discharge. But I never contacted them again. Kind of a, weird situation. But technically, I got out in 1996, I think. But I really got out in 1994.
Okay. As an E5.
Yeah.
Nice, dude.
I was just,
So if you don't mind, dude, I want to dig into some BMX and some mountain biking, bro.
Yeah.
What when you first started racing or riding a bike? Were you kind of like were you a natural on a bike when you were? I guess you probably started when you were in junior high or elementary school or something, right?
So this kid, I told you my dad's vice president was Army SF guy. He moved his whole family from Virginia, the Shoals, and I learned so much from that family. They were really cool. I used to hang out there a lot. Andy was into BMX. His brother Alex was super into music. He ended up doing a full retiring out of the Air Force. Alex did. Andy was into BMX. Got me into BMX. My dad generally didn't invest in me doing sports because he didn't think I would stick with it or something. So, like when I played Babe Ruth, or not Babe Ruth, when I played Little League, I remember I'm at baseball practice and, like I'm throwing, I'm like, throwing like a girl. No offense, girls. And the coach is watching me, and I'm throwing and catching the ball and throwing. And then finally I catch the ball and I take my glove off and I throw it like proper because I was left-handed, but I only had a right-handed glove that was my brother's. And I ended up, I don't think anybody didn't make the team, but I ended up making being on the team. And finally, when I was on there, my dad bought me a left-handed glove. Well, the same goes with BMX. I really wanted to get into BMX, and the first bike that my dad got me was a Kent from Sears. And I had it for about 2 weeks, and we had this one jump that we were hitting down by the basketball court. It was like a big root jump, and my buddy Andy and I swapped bikes, and he jumped my bike and snapped the rear end off, and I jumped his. Nothing happened. I think he had a Schwinn scrambler, and we took it back to Sears. I got a new one, and then a week went by and I broke it. Then I told my dad, can we return this and get the money back? So I got the money back, and then I went to Jamestown Cycle Shop, and they had a Schwinn Scrambler frame, chrome, and I was about 12, and I put it on layaway, and slowly but surely built it up. A lot of Andy's old parts and whatnot. I didn't have the final piece I needed was a seat post, and I didn't have the $7 or whatever to get a seat post. And it's not like my parents didn't have the money; they just, you know.
Right.
But I took my dad's broom and chopped off the handle and whittled the top, and made it so I could ride it. And I think the broom handle ended up costing me more than the seat post did. But I was riding, and so I started with him, and we rode all the time. We were building trails and just having a great time. And then we started racing out at JML, which is Jamestown Ellicott, is the track. We raced at Zor Valley, Niagara Falls, and Allen Park, I think it was called. It's an indoor skate rink that they made an indoor track with, and they would have it was flat turns and wooden jumps. But that was a lot of fun because you could ride and race. I think Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday if you went around.
And you put hairspray on your tires or no?
Oh yeah, yeah. Use the LHR snake bellies, and would do hairspray, and it's funny because some of the guys that the BMX boom hadn't happened, it would move from the west to the east, and it hadn't really happened when I was there. Most of us had paper plate number plates, and then I don't know, a year later, a lot of kids at school were riding BMX. A couple of my neighbors, we used to just go out and ride, and I definitely wasn't the best, and I wasn't the worst. I was middle of the pack. I could make the main, and but I did go to a couple of other events, like in Virginia Beach, California, uh, Pennsylvania. Washington War of the Stars was my first big race, and I went down there and got my bike stolen. I was staying with my sister, and I went to supermarket to get pizzas, and I laid my bike down in the back in the tall weeds because I was like, if I put it up front, somebody's gonna steal it. I come back and it's gone. And,
what would that was a scrambler?
that was a torquer.
Oh, torquer. Okay, now you're up to the torquer. Okay.
Well, Jamestown Cycle Shop had a deal that you would work there for free, but it was just on Saturdays you'd ride your bike down there and change inner tubes or move stock around or do whatever they told you. And we had they called it a co-factory sponsorship, and I got a co-factory from Torquer, which was you basically got to buy something cheaper than normal. And I remember I had the Max leathers and the Premier helmet and the jersey and all that. And I saw how much I was sponsored when I got down to the Washington War of the Stars. And I went to the Torquer truck and asked them if I could borrow some Comp 3s because it looked like it was going to rain and I had snake bellies on. And they were like, no, it's only for riders. And I'm like, look at my jersey. And he's like, yeah, you can buy that online. I was like, oh. Okay. So that wasn't the first time. I found that out with GT too when I was riding for GT. But I was really riding for Right Way East. But yeah, and I raced a little bit there, but my dad, I remember my dad because Wes would go and he was typical BMX dad. We made a song one time. It was like a Ramones song. It's like 6-pack before the first moto, BMX dad. Yelling on the sidelines, go, 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 BMX dad. And I remember he was definitely a BMX dad. And my dad, he's telling my dad, why don't you come out and watch your son race? He's actually pretty good. And my dad came out watch us practice a little bit, and I'm in my first actual moto, and I come down. I think I was second in the moto, and I'm all excited to see my dad's reaction. And I look out, and he's driving away. But yeah, so I raced BMX uh, and budding freestyle until 1984.
We win the core.
Yeah, and then when I went in the core, um, I was well. Track back a little bit. My brother had a road bike, and my brother had horses, and well, they were family horses, but my brother took care of them. And he was going somewhere for school or something, and I had to like feed the horses for a week or two or something. And a BMX bike would not make these hills. It was like a very hilly area, and so I used his road bike to go up there because I was only 16, didn't have a driver's license yet. If I maybe I had a learner's permit. And go and feed these horses, and I got into road biking a little bit. Like the first day, it was really, really hard, but by the second week, I could get up there, and I was like, I'm pretty cool. So I was going somewhere and flying back to the Kennedy. It might have been when I went home for my birth dad's funeral, and I met this officer, and I was looking for a magazine to read on the plane, and the magazine was Winning magazine, a road bike magazine. It was like the closest I had to bike riding magazine. And he's like, "Oh, we have a little crew that rides on the Kennedy." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah, I think he's part of the Navy cycling team." And so we were going to Trieste, Italy, and he knew a place called Couture Trieste, which is like a high-end road bike shop. And they give military deals. And I went with him, and he was a O2 in the Navy, I think. And I went with him, and I got hooked up with a Colnago Master, and I bought it for 1 million lira, I remember, which is about $600, something like that. And then I had to get permission from our dad to bring this bike on ship because, like, we're in really tight quarters, you know. And where my bunk was, it was in the back corner, and there was this big steam pipe, and I would just take toe straps and put each of the wheels on there, and it would just lay against the wall and didn't bother anybody, and they allowed me to do it. So typical Marine, you go into port, first bar, first girl, sorted. Not me. I rode. I mean, it was awesome. I got to ride from like Haifa to Bethlehem. Had two flats. Some locals picked me up, treated me to dinner. Um, I rode I'd ride from Monaco to San Rafael along the coast. I saw Ronan Pensick, he had just won the Junior Prestige Pernod, and like I just loved it, riding road. And then I went to the grunts, brought my road bike down there. Then I deployed, smoking cigarettes in the Philippines, and
well, back then, cyclists still smoking cigarettes back then.
Definitely not.
When that was a big thing in like the 50s or the 40s, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I got to, I did some racing over there. Had a really bad crash in Palma de Mallorca. A girl ran across the race route, and another girl runs, and I kind of like, and I start to swerve, so I'm like already leaned over, and she pushes me. I get pushed into a car. I hit the car once, and apparently I was in shock because all I wanted to do is find my Ray-Bans. And then they, took me back to the ship, and my fork was folded back, and Bob Bobro, I just remember that. That's the officer that was helping me out. And then there was another guy, Lieutenant Cox, who's a Marine aviator, and he's one of the guys that we lost. I used to ride with him too. He was kind of more standoffish, and I got reprimanded because I would get on the officer boat with all these guys because it was much quicker. And so I'd get on the officer boat with all these officers, and then we'd go ride. And one time I got busted and had to take the enlisted boat, and then I ended up riding by myself because I already took off, and it was like. But that was good time. But then once I got to the grunts, it was I rode around a little bit. It was
Yeah.
just it's not the same lifestyle.
Yeah, I have one. I have two funny road bike stories where, like 1990, I was working at Main Bikes in Alhambra, California, with my brother, and a customer came in. He was a little overweight, kind of a little chunky guy, and he started buying. He bought like a GT. It looked like a GT triple triangle, like a Zascar, but it had road bike tires, 7C wheels on it.
Oh,
He bought all this stuff. He bought a bike, he bought gear, he bought racks, packs. And we're all, what are you doing, man? And he goes, yeah, I'm gonna ride from California to New York. And we're all, you're crazy, dude. And after the guy, he left, and we saw him like 3 months later. He came back and he's all fit and trim, and he's like, yeah, dude, it was great. So my brother goes, dude, we should do a ride. And I'm all, what do you want to do, man? So he goes, we should take our bikes, we should fly up to San Francisco, and then put our bikes together at the airport and ride our bikes back down to LAX. And I was like, okay, whatever, we'll try it. So I bought a 1990 Diamondback Centurion road bike for like $179.
yeah.
And we rode the bikes back down, and I don't know if you're familiar with the California coast, but we rode the whole way down, except that we cheated. Well, my brother would have rode the whole way, but we got into Big Sur, and there was a sign that said "Hills and Curves next 63 miles" or something. I'm all, there's no way, dude, I'm not doing this. So we actually hopped in the back of back when you could hitchhike and get in the back of a pickup truck, and we hitchhiked up through Big Sur, and then came back down. And then we rode the rest of the way, but that was the longest road bike ride I've ever been on. And then
That's
when I owned my bike shop, that I'm sure we'll talk about fiction and stolen in a minute. But when I owned my bike shop, I knew nothing about road bikes, and this older gentleman brought a bike in that he said he wanted to give to his grandson, and it was an Eddie Merckx. It was like a early '70s Eddie Merckx. It was pristine. It had campy everything on it. And I was like, I had no idea what I was looking at until another customer goes, "Do you have any idea what kind of bike that is?" I go, "No, what is it?" And so I had to box this guy's Eddie Merckx road bike up and ship it out for him. And I probably could have done a better job if I knew how much that bike was worth at the time. But not road bike. I was not road bike friendly at all, dude. So
yeah.
that's uh, I never really enjoyed riding road bike. We did the road bikes for the there was a Mexico fun ride from Ensenada, from Rosarito to Ensenada. We used to do that every year, but we were drunk on mountain bikes doing that one. But so I keep interrupting you, bro. I'm sorry, man. The mountain, but so you become affiliated with GT somehow, and you start racing downhill.
Yeah. So I okay. So I was when I was in the Army. At first, I was doing security. I worked for a company called Burke Security. Started over at DuPont and just like standing a post, roving guard, whatever. Then I became a lieutenant, and then I was at Goodyear, and I was the head of security for the Goodyear, whatever the belting, I think in Niagara Falls. Then I got moved to special unit, and we did World Rally. Um, I was head of external security for the Buffalo Bills. Um, then did like a lot of concerts, um, Monsters of Rock, Van Halen, AC/DC, and the Grateful Dead. And I sold audio equipment for a minute. And this was, I think I had worked at a bike shop and then they laid me off in the winter. I'm like, I'm not doing that again. And then the owner kind of asked me to come back. He said that I was Dave with, and there was another guy there who was Dave without. And one time the guy asked, because we used to get a case of Labatt's Blue every day at that bike shop, and we'd be drinking on the sales floor. Everything was, definitely a different bike shop. And Dave with apparently was Dave with a brain, and the other kid was Dave without. And I worked there, and I remember he showed me this guy Reed, who was the manager there at the time, showed me a trials bike, a GT Ricochet, and explained what trials was, and I was like, that sounds stupid, because I was and then a rep came in and said, oh, I was talking about trials, and he goes, oh, I have a Haro that is missing the front wheel or something. I'll sell it to you for $150. So I bought it and rode that for a little bit, maybe a year, something like that. And then I got a GT Ricochet, and the GT Ricochet was a 87, 88 bike, something like that. And so I started riding that, did some competitions, and I was okay. I actually was just competing in like expert or novice or something. And then I went to Ohio for this event, and they're like, oh, no, it's only pro. Or I was going to an event, and they said, oh, no, it's only pro. And I wanted to do the event. So I talked to Norba, and they're like, oh, you can turn pro. You got enough points and enough, I had the resume, I guess, to turn pro. And so I turned pro. And then I did all the events, nationals, the local stuff like Candy Town. And I've even put on an event called the Raccoon Rally that I guess is still going on today in New York. And I didn't really care about competing in trials, to be honest. It was just the riding and having fun with my boys, all the friends. And we'd go to like Canada and we'd do all these events. We'd do shows. I did shows for Interbike. The one that was fun was the first Extreme Games. They didn't call it the X Games yet. It was called the Extreme Games in 1995. I was on the way out. I was national number 7 in 1994. I was national number 5 going into the finals in 95. And then I broke my bike, and I was sponsored by GT, which was, so if you worked at, if your brother works at Felt, then you would probably know John Georger.
Yeah, he's a sales guy.
Yeah, John Georger and Chris Georger used to run, I think it was called Georgers, and it was a wholesaler in Buffalo. And I lived in Hamburg and worked in Tonawanda, and they were kind of on the way. So I'd go there almost every single day. And I went and saw, the way I got into trials is I saw Hans Ray do a demo there. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And the guy was so cool and so genuine. And like most people, when they're a top athlete, they just kind of like blow you off and everything. He was like super cool and just made me feel like, oh, I want to do this, And trials is one of those things, kind of like Flatland, that there is no I'm okay at it. You're either can do it or you can't.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
And there was, I never had a hope of being number one. The top guys were just too good, and they lived it. And I was old. I was 28 years old when I started. You know what I mean? I was already old. These guys, Mark Brooks was 10-time world champion or national champion, and the guy was just, that's all he did was ride trials. Now we go to trails, he can't ride for shit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He'd ride trials like a crazy man. So I started doing that, and then I got notification that the Extreme Games were coming around, and they were inviting the top 8 Americans and 2 Europeans, Lieber Karas and Hans Ray. And Lieber lived with me for a while, and Hans was my friend. And I had a distribution company called the Underground at the time, which was a side thing. I was distributing Magura, Troy Lee Designs, Monty Bicycles, and then Underground stuff, which was my own brand. And so I got invited to the first Extreme Games. And the one thing I didn't mention is that I was also the Norba chief commissar for trials. So I wrote the rules for trials, which basically I adopted most of the European rules. Trials was very slow and boring to watch until we changed the rules because there was time limits. So guys could be in the section for 10 minutes. If they just stop and rest their front tire against the log, they can, just sit there indefinitely. There was no time limit. So we installed like 2-minute time limit and things like this. Made it. So Brian Stickler from Norba, who was the head of Norba, he wanted me to run the event, but I wanted to ride. And he said, well, we're probably only going to invite 4 Americans and 2 Europeans. And I was like, oh, well, that would put me out. And then so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I think it paid me $3,000 for 3 days, which was pretty good money. And I ended up being the course designer and running the event. And so we went up to Mount Snow, Vermont, and that's where they did the downhill, the dual slalom, and the trials. Everything else was in New Hampshire. There was I don't think there was any BMX in the first one. And I ended up, they covered the top 2 Americans, which was Jeff Lanowski and Mark Brooks, and then the top 2 Europeans, which were Lieber and Hans. And I ended up being on TV way more than I thought, because when they were like showing how the event went, I was the rider, how to score and whatnot. The Cullen commentary, they interviewed me. And then there was a big argument between Hans Ray where he went outside the ribbons and was saying he didn't. And then they did that where they zoom in and they like make it super clear that he was like 8 inches outside the course, and all this. But they followed us around with these little stick cams, which is the first time they ever used a stick cam, a little camera like this big. And it was pretty cool to be in that event. I don't ever like watching it because they made me wear these X Games shorts that are really short and an X Games shirt and X Games shoes and a camelback and but so I did that. And at that time, one of my sponsors, Magura, who makes it's a German disc brake manufacturer. Well, at the time, they didn't make disc brakes; they made rim brakes only, hydraulic rim brakes. And they offered me a job to handle their race and sports marketing. And so I drove around in a big Suburban with a 22-foot trailer that I also slept in most nights, and traveled around all the nationals and everything. Still riding every once in a while. I did like Seattle Classic, competed there, and just every once in a while, just for fun. And I found that I really liked just riding. I didn't like competing. I just didn't like the pressure, And I then got an offer from. So I'd worked with. I don't know if you know who Sean Palmer is.
No.
He's a border cross and snowboarder, pro snowboarder, and he decided to race a mountain bike. And I didn't know who he was. And then he came to my trailer and wanted me to work on his brakes. And I was like, just putting up the ramp, I'm like, yeah, come back tomorrow, bud. And then somebody says, I think that's Sean Palmer. I said, who's that? And he's like, oh, he's like world champion snowboarder. And I was like, oh. So next day he comes and I'm like, why don't we put the race lines on there, which is the high end brake from Magura. He didn't like it because they were neon yellow, he wanted a all black bike, but I convinced him. And then the next event he won. And on to be second at world championships and some other stuff. but I guess he liked working with me, and they invited me to be European team manager and uh, mechanic with Buck, who was his regular mechanic, and he had just started as Specialized. And so went to Africa, Italy, and Spain, Sierra Nevada, Spain, were the world rounds, and that was my first time to do European race stuff, which was kind of cool. And then I
Let me
had,
ask you a question, but like a lot of people don't realize. I would assume that you're getting a decent. They're taking care of you, but you're not. You're not becoming a millionaire, becoming a bicycle mechanic for factory teams, right? Or was it like
oh, they pay you a lot of
were
money.
you like totally stoked, happy, well paid, well fed, or was it kind of like a dog eat dog type of thing?
Um, with Magura, absolute dog shit. I think I got paid $13,000 for the year,
Yeah.
but I was able to buy Magura brakes at wholesale, and then was able to sell them at the events, and then I would put them on for free. And so I was making good money then. I would make in a weekend, I'd make $1,500 in a weekend doing that. But they paid me horribly. I didn't get a hotel budget. I didn't get a food budget. It was just really bad. And but I wanted to get my foot in the door, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Specialized, I got paid pretty good because I told them I didn't want to do it. And I think they paid me $5,000 for the 3 events. Plus, I got, obviously everything paid for.
Right.
I think where they saw it though is when I went up to Morgan Hill to help, because disc brakes were coming around, and Palm wanted to run disc brakes, and so I drove up on my own dollar. I think Magura paid for gas, and they came out one morning and saw the Magura truck in the parking lot, like at 6 a.m. And they came up to the truck, and there I am sleeping in the back of it. And they're like, "You're sleeping in the truck?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "I just want to get this done." And so
Mm-hmm.
Dave, the guy who was the current head mechanic, um, asked me if I wanted to stay at his house, and I stayed at his house. And then they asked me if I wanted to do this full time after I did the event and prove myself. And they were going to pay me a lot better than the other people, but I didn't want to work for Specialized after talking to buddies that worked there, and said it was just wasn't like all hippie and you know
Mm-hmm.
and it was very high pressure and not a really great company to work for. I had that job, and then I also had a job. Matt, whose name I cannot recall, was over at Camelback, and because of being a Marine, and they were trying to field the Camelback with Marines, and they wanted me to be the liaison for that. And then I had a job offer from SRAM. Um, that would have been cool because I'd done the tech tour with those guys, and they were like super cool. And then the other job was working for Tioga. Um, Tioga, what was cool about that is that one of my best friends worked for Tioga already, and they wanted me to live in Europe and to commit to 4 years. And originally, I remember they offered me 21,000, I think, for the year, but they were going to pay for my house. And well, at first they weren't going to pay for my house or anything, right? They were just like, "No, that's all you get." And then, well, you got to pay rent here. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm living in a foreign country for you."
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up talking them up to 25. And I ended up, after about a year, my boss was super cool. My budgets were stupid, like $250,000. I didn't have to submit a cash receipt if I was at 24999. I traveled 180 to 208 days. Was the short. The 180 was the shortest travel year. Visited all Western and parts of Eastern Europe, and would just travel all the time. And I ended up making more than twice that, plus bonuses, just after proving myself. And and still like riding every day, and it was great. You were asking me about GT when I was competing. when I was working at the bike shop and competing, Howard and Chris Georger were the guys who hooked me up with GT. And then Hans, because I was friends, he would like, I would do like demos and stuff that either he couldn't do or didn't want to do. And then, I got to meet like all these guys. Like Mike Miranda was the guy handling all the jerseys at the time, and I didn't want to wear a mountain bike jersey. The picture you posted is like the one thing that was like for something for GT, and they wanted me to wear the mountain bike uniform.
Mm-hmm.
But because they wore like the regular zip up mountain bike jersey,
Yeah.
I wore the BMX uniform. So they modified a BMX uniform and didn't put like WD-40 and other stuff. They put like Club Roost and Uni and all this other stuff. My sponsors on there with Wooten on the back, which I threw away those jerseys, and I kind of wish I didn't. But
when my brother was at GT, they used him as the model in the catalog for a couple of years for all the road bike stuff. I give him a hard time, dude. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, that's just so like that's how I was affiliated with GT, and then when they were developing a trials bike for Hans, Hans asked if I would help out, and like just because I was a tech guy, I had done work for Club Roost, designing bars. I worked with Troy Lee with their helmet and VP pedals. I tested like all kinds of stuff, like magnetic clipless pedals, like all this like different stuff. And a lot of these guys, they wouldn't pay me, but they'd send me a box of 50 handlebars, things like this. So that's how I started doing the distribution company. That's the way that I got paid. GT gave me basically anything I want. I remember I was riding my BMX bike was a fueler that was like 500 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I had a LTS downhill bike, and for trials I rode their trials bike, and then for stock trials I rode a Zaskar, and I used to rip the head tubes off them all the time. So I'd always have 2 or 3 in weight, and then whenever I traveled, I'd always bring one with me, and I sometimes had to do a frame swap at an event, but yeah, and then so I started working for Tioga, and that was I was at the show, Interbike show for Magura for the first day and a half, and then I just went over to Tioga and put a different shirt on. And it was kind of funny because all the magazine guys were like, "What are you doing over here?" Started working for them and I worked for Tioga and lived with my buddy at his house. Paid his mom and dad rent because they were giving me a hotel budget. I wasn't allowed to stay there because he was trouble. And it was with the U.S. boss, but we had the same title, so I just said, "Fuck you," And then I moved to Amsterdam in December '97, and I lived over there for 4 years, and then moved to an apartment in Bologna, Italy, and would go over there less. Like before, I would stay full time, and I think in 4 years I was in the States for less than 30 days, and most of it was for Interbike, and a couple occasional like World Cup or national that the U.S. guy couldn't hit, and that was cool because I got to like meet so many new people and so many new racers, and it was just great. I definitely felt at home with the English people more than anywhere else, and I would started going to Taiwan at that time, at least one time a year, and as many as 5 times a year, and I've been to Taiwan 40, 50 times, somewhere in there.
Can I ask you a couple of Taiwan questions?
Yeah.
I've heard stories from my brother that Taiwan, the Taiwanese bike guys, they try to get you drunk all the time the night before. Yeah, he told me that he used to go in there for quality control, and the night before he had an inspection, they'd take him out. They'd be kung pieing all night long, trying to get him drunk so he'd miss something on the assembly line. Is that about accurate?
It doesn't have to be at night. It's a midday meeting. They yeah, Kampai and Hodala. Kampai is Japanese, I guess, but they use that. And then Hodala is Taiwanese for like bottoms up. I taught them a new one though. Is they always say Hodala, and I go, oh, half dollar, like. And but they do like the little VFW glasses of beer.
Uh-huh.
You know, a little slender glass like you'd get orange juice in or something. That's what they drink out of. And then they have Taiwan beer, and they just fill you up, and then they go around the room and Hodala. The worst one is when you go to the KTV. So KTV is karaoke.
You told me about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you go to karaoke, that is the hard one because now they're drinking whiskey and water. And I had one time, I'm like, I just got over antibiotics. I'm not going to drink whiskey. I'll just drink beer. And I was just nursing my beer, you know? And you play like they have these girls that come in and you play like games, like dice games and stuff with them. And then they sing karaoke. They're like, I don't even know what you call it. Like, it might be prostitutes, but they're like just accompany people, you know? They just
Right.
accompany and give you somebody to talk to and do whatever. But I had my beer there and I wasn't really paying attention. We're just playing dice and my business partner's over here and we're like shooting the shit. And this guy, I guess, they have these like little tumblers of whiskey. And he just kept on, I guess, pouring it in there. And he poured it in there and I caught it out of the corner of my eye. And then he comes in and he goes, Hodala. And I'm like, oh, finished my beer, right? And I saw him put the whiskey in there one time. And then I start to drink it. And she said, he put whiskey in. And I said, I saw. And I drink it. And she goes, many, many, many. And I like drank to the bottom of it. And that was the last thing I remember. But yeah, they do that. Well, there's this one section that we go to that are frame maker, fork maker, handlebar and stem maker, our old frame maker. And you go to your first meeting at 9 a.m. and you're already drinking. Then you go to your next one, you're drinking. You go to your next one, you're drinking. You go to the next one, drinking. Then it's lunchtime, you're drinking. And they'll go through one of those huge bottles like at lunchtime. And then what they end up doing, so like you go to lunch and all of a sudden like Mike Corley and John Byers from Eastern like were invited too, so you're drinking with them, or Phil Tinsman from some road bike company. I can't remember where he's at or was at. But you just like you definitely get your drink on. You know, it's definitely their part of their business dealings. And if you don't drink with them, I think that maybe your business would suffer a little bit.
Right. You're talking about stolen times now, right?
Well,
Or both.
yeah.
Or
well, with Tioga, it was different. Like Tioga is owned by a company called Marui. Marui was founded back in World War II. They are the trading agent for Shimano, Araya, Tange Seiki. In fact, if you look at Tioga, a lot of people don't know this because I know you're big into old school. So Tioga, everybody knows Tioga, Comp 3.
Yep.
But it's not really the Tioga Comp 3, it's the Mitsubishi Comp 3. So Tioga, when it first came out, was the idea from Ryo Marui, the founder of Tioga. BMX was booming in America, and they had no idea how to market it. And he was on vacation in California when he saw this big BMX boom. and he was out at Tioga Pass in, I think, Yosemite, and that's where he got the name Tioga because he thought it sounded so American, which is like sounds very Japanese to me, but or
Mm-hmm.
native, which is also Asian. But um, Tioga was actually made up. It was a conglomerate made up of Shimano, Araya, Cashamax, SR, Suntour, Tangay, um, like a ton of companies. Tioga didn't make any,
I
and it was
always,
all
I always, I always, I always said Tangy back in the day, dude.
yeah, Tange. Uh, but all these guys were basically they put it under Tioga, and it's also Tioga. I've heard all different kinds of stuff, but and that's the way they started. In fact, if you look at the old Shimano ads, they actually had Tioga's address listed on the Shimano ads. The U.S. arm for Tioga is Oriental Boeki Corporation, and that's where they put all of the American people under. I was actually under Marui. I was the only gaijin, uh, which is like white boy in Japanese or something. I was the only employee over there. My paycheck came from Marui, not OBC. And the main reason is I didn't want to be associated with OBC because the guy who was running it was a dick and a micromanager, and I wouldn't be able to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the stipulations: is he couldn't be my boss. Um, the so I think Tioga ended up like really big in the 80s, and then everybody kind of parted off on their own in the 90s. And Tioga had to stand on its own, and they still used, like when we made downhill rims for Tioga, they were made by Araya. When we made our tires, they were always made by Mitsubishi. And, it was just when I went to work for Tioga, they were at a charge. We came up with the factory series tires and then the 5 Elements tires, and they had the downhill saddles and all this stuff. We were still doing BMX. Like I was working with Stephen Murray and Neil Wood and just like a lot of top BMX racers. And back then, everybody was using other brands. Like today, everybody makes their own tires. We make our own tires. We own, I don't know, a dozen molds for tires.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, everybody used Tioga or Maxxis or whatever. And the same with rims. We were the first, as far as I know, we were the first BMX complete brand to make our own rims. Everybody at the time was using Alienation or Alex or Sun,
Mm-hmm.
and we made our own rims, and it was just like different. Now everybody does it. Um, but so Tioga, I did that until I lived in Europe until 2001, and then they were supposed to move to New York and run Europe, and then they were having problems with um, the staff in California. So they asked me to move to California. So in 2001, I moved to California. But I would go to work at like 5:30 in the morning and then leave there at 2. And just the atmosphere there was not good. So I wanted out. And I started a brand development company called Greasy Comb because at the time I had a big rockabilly pompadour and everything. And I wanted to have a different name. It was a stupid name, but I thought it was cool at the time.
Right.
Uh, I had started talking to Anthony Revel. Anthony Revel is BMX world champion, European champion, UK champion. And I met him on the race scene. The first time I ever met him was at the Plymouth Invitational. And Steve Kitchen from Animal, was his sponsor. Animal was like a watch company. And they were sponsored by PlayStation and Orange Bicycles out of the UK. And Steve Kitchen's like, oh, Revs is getting ready to come up. I'm like, who's that? And he's like, oh, it's our new guy to race dual slalom and four cross and whatnot. He's like, he's really fast. Now, I'm used to seeing every weekend, Mike King, Eric Carter, Brian Lopes, John Tomac, all these guys that are the fastest in the world. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I've seen fast, Sure enough, he gets up in the gate and he pulls everybody full bike length ahead of them on the first straight. Just a animal. Got such a gate, First corner was a flat corner and everybody passed him because he didn't know how to ride flat corners yet because he just started. And that was my first meeting with him. And we became friends over the years, when he was riding. He ended up going to another team, but it was also sponsored by Tioga. And then I went to the Birmingham Bike Show. And the Birmingham Bike Show always has like races and freestyle show and everything. And he had a big booth and he was doing Revel bikes that I was aware of because he had brought me a Revel. I was riding a Spooky. And he got me on a Revel, gave it to me when I was in Taipei one time. And then we went there and he had Martin Murray riding for him, and which is Stephen Murray's brother, and some other guys. And I was like, Revel's really cool. So I had exposed his agent on price gouging because he had a crank that he was paying $45 for. And I had dinner with the vendor that makes the crank the night before. So we went over there to see how much the crank is. And he told me the price would be $43 or $23. So they were basically doubling their money, which normally an agent makes 5 to 10%, more on new people, obviously. But that was just crazy, doubling their money. So showing him this, he asked if I would help him out. And it's kind of funny because the agent that he was using, they're gone now, a company called Muchachos. The guy ended up offering me a job. And he wanted me to develop his brand in the United States. It was a company called Fun. They make mountain bike stuff. And Perv is the BMX company. And that allowed me to work on Revel as well, because it only cost me about 20 hours a week to do that. And then he had this other brand, Stolen, which I wasn't really interested in. It was basically mongoose bikes, it was just complete bikes. Wasn't really interested. And I set up a booth at Interbike, and we had Dance Comp came by, and I was showing him. I saw the guy; he had a badge that said Dance Comp. Didn't know the guy at the time, and that was a good friend of mine. And I just showed him the stuff, and he said, "Well, we're not really looking for anything right now." And this was in September, and then in December, he called me and said, "Hey, we have when are you getting your first container?" And I said, "Spring, 2003." And he said, "Well, free agent's pulling out, so we want to add a couple of bikes from you." He put the bikes on the website; they sold out, and then he added all the bikes. And by the time that we got the first containers in, they took like almost everything. And
cool.
That was the beginning. Yeah, and Revel was the one I thought was going to be the winner, and it was because it was copied like a lot. Like I was telling you, like Black Market Bikes copied it. I came in and at S&M where we were making the bike, and they got our frame up on the jig, and they were copying it.
Right.
And Revel was like really, really innovative and cool as far as a 24 and 26-inch dirt jump slalom bike. We ended up signing Neil Wood to ride for us, and Martin Murray, and he was doing Sea Otter, and did well there. I think he might have won Sea Otter that year on a Revel. Definitely made the main. But Then Stolen, we did a couple years. I was only supposed to find a distributor for him and help him market it, like take the stuff to the magazines and show it to him. And so, being in California, back then you had BMX Plus, um, you had Trans World BMX, you had Trans World Business News, Ride BMX, and somebody else. Then you had like mountain bike stuff, all the mountain bike action, Decline, Bike, um, just tons of magazines. And so
Sure.
I would go visit all the magazines, and we had like Bicycling magazine, which is huge. We had a 2-page write up on it, and just on the Revel, and just that's what my job was. We couldn't find a distributor that was able to take it, so I ended up making Grease Comb Distribution, and we started distributing it. And we did that for a couple of years and had like double, triple growth every single year. Expanding warehouses. At first, I was just in like a little 600 square foot warehouse, and then a 2,000 square foot warehouse, then a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and like just growing. Then we turned over distribution. Well, I'll backtrack. So I was doing all this, and I was just basically getting money from the stuff that I sold. I didn't get anything from anything sold in Europe or Asia or anywhere else. And a few years into it, I hit up my business partner, which is Anthony Revel. He's the founder. And I told him I wanted to be a partner, and he wasn't interested. They ended up talking to his dad, and his dad told him that he thinks he should do it. And I became a 25% partner. That was the only argument in 21 years that we ever had. It wasn't heated. It was just a disagreement. If we have a disagreement, he's like, no, I don't think we should do that. And I'll be like, well, I think we should. And he's like, well, let's talk about it tomorrow. You know what I mean? That's like, we really have disagreements. And then the agreement was that I had already taken over the year before all the design. And that's when we had really changed things by not just buying a bike from an assembly factory like everybody else was doing. We spent about, I don't know, a long time over in Taiwan and went and visited every manufacturer and potential manufacturer. And we went in there with our agent, and we were like, okay, how much is this going to cost us? And they'd look at each other and talk in Taiwanese and said, the real price? And he's like, yeah, the real price. No backdoor? No backdoor, everything, you know. And we made up specification where every straight, but we actually put it on 2 years before he put it on his complete bikes. You know, we paid attention to the market, and we went from making a bike that I think was a copycat of other people that had already done it for years to reinventing the wheel a little bit, and just little things, all black nuts and bolts. Why had nobody ever done it before? It just looks so much better.
Right.
Just little things, but mainly putting aftermarket geometries, the current freestyle stuff, onto a complete bike. There's a Fullerton Bikes in Fullerton, California. It was not
Mike Franzi, my boy.
Yeah, Mike Franzi. They were not a big fan of ours. Mike, not a fan. But there was a guy who worked for him. He's a filmer named Vish, and super good guy, super good filmer. He said to me, "It's crazy. We took the top end fit, and we took the top end Integral, which was a company that was a made-up brand from, I think it might have been Rich Hirsch, who ended up doing Stranger. But it was a complete bike brand, you know? And it was called the Heater at the time. It was a collab that we did with Shadow Conspiracy, who was also pretty new at the time, an aftermarket parts company.
Right.
And he said, we rode all the bikes around the parking lot and just kind of filming. Why does your bike feel like my bike? Like his, $1,100 bike. I'm like, because we have the same geometry on it. And the other guys are just taking a frame from the vendor, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The funny one is, so we did a collaboration with Ronnie B, is a friend who owns Shadow Conspiracy Sabrosa. He used to own UGP. And I approached him about doing a collaboration with him on this bike because we shared a team rider by the name of John Jennings. And so we did a collaboration with him that was our frame, fork, his bar, his stem, his seat, maybe his pedals, and his tires. Oh, and his halfling chain. And we did this bike, and he did the graphics. I had him design the graphics for it because he's pretty good at that stuff. And I was just starting out doing graphics. That bike broke the internet kind of deal. Normally, with that kind of bike, with a $500-600 bike, you'd think that people sell 10,000 and they're lucky to sell 50. Like Haro and all those guys, they're lucky to sell 50. This bike sold over 1,000 in a year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and what ended up happening is we did 2 quarters with them, and definitely the number one high-end bike, by far. And then the third quarter, I think it was his wife or girlfriend, Rachel. She she was the one that we ordered through, and we put our order in, and we're waiting for our product, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, it's coming."
Oh, okay.
On a roll, right? They're doing really cool advertising and whatnot, and but what they had done is they planned on not supplying us, and so I went over to their vendors, and you know the seat clamp maker said, because we used their seat clamp, the Alfred seat clamp, I still remember, and the seat clamp maker's like, well, yeah, that the mold broke. And he lied to us. So I told him, I said, well, we're gonna buy, 5,000 of these easy, and they ended up calling us back and saying, oh yeah, the mold's fixed, and like an hour later, um, but so they tried to screw us, and they launched Sabrosa off our back. So me being the genius I am, I went to Odyssey and did a collab with them, and same thing. We work with them. We're buying more of their plastic pedal than they are. For sure, the white one. I don't know about all of them, but I was told that, by one of their distributors, they were trying to buy them from me. And we did a similar thing. And then guess what? They launched Sunday because they'd never done OEM,
Right.
before. And now their eyes are open that, wow, there's a really big market in there. And it was not the normal case. It was a very special case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that that was a
I sold a couple. I used to sell a couple Sundays here and there from Full Factory.
yep, yeah. Well, Jim C. That's kind of funny point. Jim Selensky, who was their pro rider and they put him as the founder. It was really Odyssey who founded Sunday, but they put him as the founder of Sunday, and he was very instrumental. You know, he was big on with the 24-inch bikes, like the bigger bikes. They did it first. We did it right, and we were the first ones. Like Sunday and Stolen were the first ones to do like bigger bikes and have success at it. You know, in the past 20 years.
Right.
And but anyway, we ended up parting ways with them, and just we figured we didn't need them anymore. I think we did before we launched our tires. We did Tioga tires on the bikes for a little bit, but it was a co-branded tire, Stolen X Tioga, and then we opened up molds for our own tires, and yeah, I think it definitely added some competitors. There's both of those guys are still in business today,
Right.
And I looked at one time, and from when we started, because when we started, as I mentioned, I think Eastern and Fit were the only two new companies. Everybody else was old school, DK and Haro and Free Agent and Redline, and there were 22 new companies that came after us that were making complete bikes, and most of those companies aren't here anymore.
Yeah. What happened to Eastern? They went up for sale like 12 years ago, 10 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Did they ever get sold?
Yeah, Eastern. I'm good friends with Mike Corley, who was one of the owners. John Byers and I almost went fisticuffs one time because he was drunk and talking shit. But I don't dislike him. I've seen him since in Taiwan, and we've had beers and whatnot.
Yeah.
But Eastern went. They got a little too big for the britches, and what they ended up doing is they started this like a bunch of new brands. I don't remember all the brand names, but one of them was like a low end parts company. One was a high end parts company. One was Crown Royal, which was a beach cruiser or city bike or something like that. And they started a mail order that was direct to consumer. Now, there was mail orders existed, but nobody was buying direct. Like Dan's Comp and Albies and Empire and all these guys were already selling. All these guys were already selling into the market. But what Eastern did was sorry, I keep on getting these alerts. What Eastern did is they went direct to consumer from Taiwan. So they bought it from Taiwan, brought it over here, and they were selling, for instance, a 2-piece pivotal seat post for $7.99. So they undercut everybody, and then I think that they didn't think that anybody would do anything about it. And Dan's Comp and all the other mail orders dropped them. And at that time, if you were selling BMX, Dan's Comp was probably 40 to 90% of your business. Like there's some people like Tree didn't want to sell the Dan's Comp, then all of a sudden they sell the Dan's Comp and they're like, holy crap, I just sold 10 times this year what I sold, and that's only their first order.
Yeah.
And Dan's Comp was a huge monster at the time.
Sure.
And they my understanding is that they went and they had this Crown Royal brand. They ordered. They gave the people a forecast, and they made the forecast, and the brand didn't do shit. So they ended up owing Kenstone. Kenstone is the assembly factory and trading agent for Kenda and Ken Light and some other Ken brands. I don't know what else. They ended up owning a crap load of money, millions and millions of dollars. They couldn't afford to pay, so Ken Stone took him to court and was awarded X amount of dollars and the name and everything else. And they put it up for auction. And the guy who founded Chain Reaction bought it, I think, for $250,000. And he owned everything with it.
Huh.
And then he started it back up. And who does he hire? The guy that put it in the ground, John Byers. So that's just typical of BMX, right? You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the end of that. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are hurting right now that have tens of thousands of bikes in stock. There's one company that is quite popular and a heavy competitor of mine, and they're about to get sued by their assembly factory because they have a crap load of bikes sitting there and parts, and they can't afford to take them. But there's others that I just came back from Taiwan, and they're telling me that this brand's got 10,000 sitting in China. This brand's got 12,000 sitting in China. And the funny thing is, both of these brands say they make them in Taiwan. So I know one of them because the assembly factory that makes them for him, he offered to make my bikes and do the same thing as he does for this company. I almost said the name. And this company says they make them in Taiwan, but what they do is they make them, paint them, do everything in China. The wheels are in a separate box from the frame, fork, bar, and all that. They get them up to Taiwan. They put in the bottom bracket and the crank arms, put the rear wheel in, attach the front wheel, and then ship it saying made in Taiwan. Because there's like all kinds of rules when you sell to Europe. There's anti-dumping, and you cannot, like, you'll pay, I don't know what it is now, but there was anti-dumping here, which is 25% on top of 11% duty. And then in UK, they don't mess around. It's 50%.
Oh, wow.
And one of those companies over there, one of the direct, maybe Jet or somebody in the UK, they got busted and they got a huge fine, you know,
Right.
by bringing bikes in from China, saying they're from somebody else.
Oh, wow. You had mentioned about Interbike. Were you a big Interbike guy? Were you there all the time for Stolen?
Yeah, I did my first Interbike in 1988, and when I worked for a bike shop, and I did Interbike East, which was in Atlantic City at the time. Then it ended up there was Interbike. It was in Anaheim for many, many years, and then it was in Atlantic
Vegas.
City as well, and then it was in Philadelphia, and then they went from Bio Show was in Vegas, which was I think a Trek brand show, and I went to that one. Then there was Cabda in Chicago, and then they moved from Anaheim to Vegas, and the last year they were in Reno.
Yeah.
And I've never missed an Interbike, and I've done, if there's East and West Coast, when I was actually in the industry from 94 or something like that, I hit East and West every single time. I never missed an Interbike. Eurobike I've been to a million times. When I was in Europe, I'd go to 20 shows because they'd have like Milan, Cologne, Eurobike is in Friedrichshafen, the Bilbao show, the Belgian show, the Amsterdam show, Oldenburg, like all these shows around Switzerland, and distributor shows and just everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We I got introduced to Interbike probably in like 2009, where my brother got me dealer passes through Felt,
Mhm.
and we went out there, and this is before I opened my bike shop, and so I was out there and I met Bob Harrow, and it was kind of funny where Matt Hoffman walked by, and I go, hey, you want a picture with Matt Hoffman? And so it was really cool. I got addicted to it. So when I opened my bike shop, I used to take the kids out of school for 3 days for Vegas, and my kids were in. I think they were like freshmen and juniors in high school, and we used to go out to Interbike, bro. Dude, it was my kids at the time. There was like maybe 20 BMX brands at Interbike, and the rest were like and they used to change their clothes. They used to put on a shirt, walk around, get all the swag from all the BMX companies, right? And then they go back and then they change their shirt and they put a hat on and they go right back around again and get more stickers and more, dude. And it was funny. They probably milked you for a lot of stickers and stuff.
Oh,
I don't
we
remember
didn't
you guys
they,
them
they
having
didn't
a
need
lot
to
of
change clothes for us.
stolen swag, but they definitely had a lot of stickers and stuff. And
That's
it was so much fun. We used to go Interbike every year, man. So we might have seen you at Interbike, dude, giving out stickers or something.
oh
Did
for
you have
sure.
any of your factory riders in Interbike? Because a lot of guys, a
Always.
lot of companies would have their factory riders there.
Yeah. We always had them there. The we used to sponsor Nora Cup, which is the big award ceremony. Like
Yep.
we sponsored the alcohol a couple times, which was cool. I remember we've got a pallet of booze, and um, that was always put on by Ride Magazine, and those guys have always been cool with us. And the I used to love just I remember what it was like to be on the other side and going and seeing all these people, and then you get on the other side of things, and I've run into I mentioned before going to a strip club with Greg LeMond, sitting at a bar with Eddie Merckx,
Yeah.
and I have this really great poster that of Eddie Merckx. I sold it on the internet. It was from his hour record. They pedal so fast for an hour, and when he had set the world record, and it held for a long time, I think. And I always would forget to bring it because he would a buddy of mine was Belgian national when I lived over there, and Sean was his name. I don't remember his helmet. Laser, I think, laser helmets. And he used to have Eddie Merckx at the booth every year. And I remember there was Eddie was big and fat, And then one year he came back and he was all fit and looking like Eddie Merckx again. It was those guys, Greg LeMond, Eddie Merckx, Bernard Hinault, all those guys. When I was in the Marines and into road bike, I was they were my heroes, the good one is Gertrude Tunis. He won Up d'Huez at the Tour de France, and for some reason we were at some event, and he's like, "Hey, how you been?" I'm like, "Oh, good, good. How about you?" And he's like, "Good." He said, "You still racing?" I'm like, "No." I said, "Every once in a while." And he thought I was some Tour de France guy. He didn't know that I was a mountain biker, right? And he buddies or something. And he used to come around hanging in my booth, and everybody's like, "Why is Kurt hanging out at your booth?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "He's cool though." And we ended up being really good buddies. And then Bart Brenchens was riding for maybe American Eagle, I think, and not Outfitters, some Euro company. And they came to me and had me build his bike that he was going to use at the first mountain bike Olympics. And that was super cool. And then I saw him 4 years ago in Taipei. He was staying in my hotel. And I went up to him. I said, "Hey, Bart, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, hey." And I said, "How you been?" He's like, "Good." And he's like, "Do I know you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I built your bike in Olympics and, for the Olympics." And he's like, "No, I don't remember." And I'm like, "I worked for Magura and then I worked for Tag." And he's like, "No." He was like, total. I mean, I didn't have a beard and I wasn't old, but he didn't remember me at all. He ghosted me.
Wow. Is Eddie Merckx still kicking?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Wow, that's I had never even heard of Eddie Merckx before I opened my bike shop, man. And
Oh, really?
yeah,
No,
road biking was not on my radar growing up. And I teased my brother when GT was doing the Olympic bikes. And I go, dude, you're designing Olympic road bikes and you've never touched a road bike in your entire life. And he thought it was funny. He's like, yeah, dude, because I just thought I just found the irony in that thing where he's working, designing these high level. Even today, he does all the high level felt stuff. And I go, dude, you never rode a road bike in your entire life, dude. You were a BMXer your whole life. I always thought that was funny where you could go into road bikes, but
Weird, but
yeah.
I don't currently ride BMX, but it's every once in a while I'll like tool around the parking lot or something, you know. But um, I don't know how many years ago I fractured my fibula and detached my foot, and I never really rehabbed it right. And like if I try to snap in and out of clipless pedals, it doesn't work. And you know, it was
Uh,
actually kind of my partner. He's a big guy like yourself, and I mean his huge wrists and everything, but the dude was so fast on the BMX bike. And about 7 years ago, maybe, whenever it was that the Worlds was in England, 6, 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in there. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna race." And he's probably about at the time he's probably 60 pounds overweight and 50, 60, something like that. I'm still like, he doesn't look like a big fat bastard, but he's just a big man, you know?
mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna race." Everybody's like in Taiwan and in the industry, just kind of like, "Yeah, right." I'll tell you what, that guy trained for 6 months. I don't know how many stone is like 13 pounds, but he lost like, I don't know, a shitload of weight and did his preliminaries, the races he had to do to get into Worlds and raced the 35 to 39, something like that, 45 to 49. I don't know what it was, something like that. And he's racing against guys that still race every weekend and absolutely spanked them. I mean, he was out 2 bike lengths ahead. Then there was a little bit of a pileup, and he ended up 5 bike lengths ahead at the finish in the final in the mains.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so the guy's still got it. Every once in a while, he'll just jumped out, get on trails or something, and he's still smooth like butter. He's just so good, and he's just a really like. I was a professional bike racer. This guy is like, I ain't on his level, you know. He's just that. I mean, I saw there's like the history of BMX, some website, and I was looking because I heard of him. I never heard of him when I was, because he wasn't around when I was racing. And I heard him from mountain bike first, and then kind of looked after that. But you look at he came to the States a few times and raced, and it's like, guys that are known for racing like Moeller and stuff, he spanked them. It was like really fast. I just don't think he
Wow.
liked traveling as much. Otherwise, I think if he would have
Yeah.
lived over in America, I think he would be like one of the names you know. But if you research him, he's Anthony Revel. He's fast as fuck.
Yes, I've definitely heard his name. I'm not familiar with what his. I should have done my research and double check the history. But if somebody, we've been at this for a while, bro. If somebody wants to get a stolen what do you suggest for? Is the casinos a good entry start to BMX with your brand, or
Yeah.
what would you recommend?
Well, we have 12, 14, 16, and 18-inch bikes. For some reason, 12 and 18 are the top sellers for the little bikes. The next up is the compact, and that is if you're trying to go from, say, 16 to 20. It's a low slung, short top tube, short stem bike that rides like a proper 20-inch. The Casino is great. It's got the things you want. Like I like to sleep at night. If I cut corners, it's by not like cut corners to save money. It's by not putting my name pad printed on the sprocket twice. It's from not, you know what I mean? That I don't save money on frame, fork, handlebar, rims, cranks, like key items. And I guess I don't save money anywhere because like we use velo seats and posts, and those are the most expensive ones you can get. Pivotal and the combo, but they're definitely good. We had a problem with forks, 15 years ago, where the forks, even the chromoly ones, you could bend them when there's no axle in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we sought out a fork manufacturer, and the fork manufacturer we use is an aftermarket fork manufacturer. They don't make OEM. They make for us and Fit and Cult and We the People. Everybody's aftermarket forks. It's like making a quality fork. We went to them and developed a OEM fork with a one-piece steerer, which nobody has an OEM fork. So they always have a two-piece welded steerer. Ours is one piece, and then what we actually do is weld the crown race on it, which nobody's caught on. I don't know why, but it makes it sleeker, it makes it lighter, it makes it stronger. We don't have any problems with forks. Little things like that we've tuned. We own our own grip molds, our own stem molds, our own seat molds, our own crank molds, our own pedal molds, our own sprocket stamping molds, our own rim extrusions, our dropouts, all this stuff. We just invested in all of that. And the Casino is a good bike. It has a sealed bottom bracket and a sealed cassette. It has our own rims on it. Oh no, that one doesn't. That one is it's a good rim though, made in Taiwan. And like it's a bike that for a beginner, it's awesome. If I wouldn't recommend you, for instance, riding it or myself. If you have somebody that's got a bit more talent, now I'd like to see some chromoly and all sealed bearings.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the stereo, which now goes in. Like the Overlord is cool, but it's just adding like 4-piece bars and some other stuff, but it's still high tensile steel. The Heist is full chromoly. I think it has chromoly legs, but a high tensile steer. But again, no problems with it. But everything on it is sealed except for the pedals. Those are the Thermalite, and they're just loose ball, but they're not. You don't have a problem with it, and they're not expensive to replace.
Right.
Obviously, the Sinner, which you mentioned before, or the Sinner XLT, that's the bike you buy that as you wear out things, no bike lasts forever. People buy a bike and they're like, I've had this thing for a year and I've already bent the wheel. Well, you're gonna bend the wheel. You're gonna get a flat. You're gonna, just all these things. And as you get better, the problem is like if you're good, you can ride that bike and probably won't do anything to it. It's
Right.
the guy learning and he's trying to do a flare but can't land it. And he does it 30 times trying to land it and then wonders why his frame bent.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that the one thing that we do is we make the bike entirely in Taiwan to our specifications with our products. And for the most part, you're not going to have a problem with it. You'll have things that do go wrong, but not on the regular because we're big enough that we have power to buy the things we want, open up molds, things like that. But we're small enough that if I want to make a change, I don't ask anybody. I just do it. My partner will automatically agree. You know what I mean? It's just we can, we're like a tier 1 unit. You know what I mean? We have the funding, the ability, and it's just a matter of, don't ask anybody and just do it.
Right. If somebody wanted, do you guys have dealers or do you do you guys have specified dealers, or if someone wanted to buy a Stolen, they go through? Who's your QVP, or is that who you go through?
We have 42 distributors globally. In the U.S., last count we had 2,551 dealers.
Okay.
And that not all of them, you can't buy a bike from all of them. Some of them carry grips or bar ends, or I don't know. A lot of them carry pedals. We sell a crap load of pedals through QVP. We have another distributor, which is A-Main. They have a warehouse in Northern California and North Carolina. It's the same people that own their A-Main is the big name in hobby. So if you get a RC car or a drone, you probably get it from A-Main. They sell us and one or two other BMX brands. QBP has been out of everything for a long time. They're doing like a reset, and they had an issue with one of their BMX companies that kind of put them at a standstill. Plus COVID, they laid off a lot of people, and but now they're finally coming back, and they're about ready to place another Stolen order. So I know a lot of dealers go to QBP. I've been dealing with it since '88. You know, when I had a dealer account at a bike shop, and we've been distributing with them for 16 years. A-Main is currently buying a lot more than QBP, but normally they're about even. And they can get their information off the website for either one of those.
Cool.
We have distributors in Canada and all across Europe and Asia.
But do you guys sell directly to consumers off your website, or you do?
We don't sell bikes too much. Like occasionally we'll come in or a return or something, so it'll be scratch and dent or whatever. We do sell, I would say that probably the most that we sell is replacement parts.
Right.
So if you buy
is that the reason, because you don't trust the end consumer to assemble their own bike? Is that one of the reasons why? Or you want to make sure that the quality is there when it's assembled by a professional? I should restate it.
We have seen definitely a difference with that little barrier of a dealer. The little barrier with the dealer is Stolen. And we always take care of everybody. That I don't think anybody talks shit on our warranty, not in the past 15 years anyway. Even when you're out of warranty, we still have a crash replacement program where you get a discount code and can buy your replacement. So, you know, if 3 years down the road you have a problem, you know, you can still get what you need at a discount and not have to pay full price. I would say that Dan's Comp is the biggest mail order that carries our stuff. Albies carries it, and they do a good job too. In Europe, we have Skate Pro does a really good job. But what Dan's Comp is doing is they're actually opening the box, assembling the bike, setting up the brakes, doing all this, and then repackaging and sending the bike out. I think they might even put it in a bigger box. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that was a possibility these days.
Yeah, it didn't used to be. With the old Dan's Comp, it wasn't. And we had a lot more warranty issues when they were just sending them out. Because, okay, you don't know what you're doing. You're assembling a bike. What do you got to do? You got to put your handlebars on. You got to put your front wheel on. And you got to put your pedals on. What could go wrong? Yeah. Well, people don't know how to do the box on the stem to tighten it properly. You know, you tighten everything down to where you have the same gap in the front and the back of the stem on both sides. And then you go this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, until it's all tight.
Right.
And you want to tighten it tight. And with all the like neon color paints and whatever, like it makes it thicker, or matte colors, or it ends up more likely that your bars will slip if you don't tighten it properly. So somebody will complain, oh, my bars slipped. I see bent forks How did the forks bend? The dropout's like this. Well, how's that possible? They didn't tighten it, and they landed, and the axle came out of the one side and bent the fork dropout.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. The wheel moving. Um, the I've seen so many people that don't realize that the left and the right pedal are opposite threads. You know. And so we get people that are like, "Oh, your threads are all messed up on your." And I'm like, "Well, it doesn't come from the factory like that, you know."
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I can only imagine that.
The biggest for us, the biggest game changer was about 7 years ago. We left the agency that we were with. They were doing some shady stuff. The owner was like, we had a brand called Fiction. Well, we still have a brand called Fiction, but we were making completes. And we went into their warehouse to pick something up, and I see all these Fictions palletized, like all in boxes and everything palletized. And we're like, the heck are these? We don't have any bikes in stock. We haven't had bikes in stock for 2 years. And we go there, and they're making Fiction bikes and sending them to like Eastern Europe. They don't have Fiction stickers on it, but it's a Fiction spec bike. It comes with a Fiction box. You know, they can put their own logos on it, I guess, when it gets there, but they're using our spec and all this stuff. So he was doing that and some other shady stuff with exchange rate. Because exchange rate, you can make a lot of money or you can lose a lot of money on exchange rate, you know, because when you're talking millions of dollars and you're set at 29 Taiwan dollar per US dollar, and then it goes up to 34 and a half. Well, I'm owed some money, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just some shady stuff with that. And we ended up leaving and starting our own agency. Now we can't own it because we're not Taiwanese, you know, but the guy, David, who owns it, he and his wife, they are stolen. I mean, stolen runs in their blood. All they do is us. You know, they've got 4 people going to the factories, quality control, all this stuff. And with that, that has really like improved, uh, reduced the amount of times I have to go to Taiwan. I don't have to go 5 times a year. You know what I mean? Maybe go once or twice. And it improved the quality of production because, you know, you can get, you'll get an issue with something and hopefully they catch it. And it could be just a paint issue. And I still see sometimes where like it looks like somebody hit the rear triangle with a forklift and the box isn't damaged. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This stuff, they don't look at every bike. You know what I mean? They're watching the line and doing, and they miss stuff, but they catch most of it, you know? And people that are building in China, there are people that own BMX companies that have never been to Taiwan. Proper is a UK brand. They've never been to Taiwan. How can you have the best product if you don't go there and meet with the vendor? You're not going to get the best price. You're not going to get the best product. You need to go there. Like there's some guys that go there 8 times a year. You know, there's some guys that have people that live over there that work for the
Mm-hmm.
company. I did that when I was with Fun. You know, I lived in a sex hotel. They called it. It has a garage, and you pull in with your girlfriend apparently, and you go upstairs, and it's all porn on the TV all the time, and then you go down and leave, and nobody sees you, and I don't know. But I lived in that and had a scooter and went to work every day, and I mean, I've been doing it long enough now where, and we don't switch vendors. If a vendor has a problem, we bring them up. We don't just say, "Oh, this guy's a dime cheaper. Let's go there." Because when you have something that works, you want to continue. You know what I mean? And you want to make it the best you can make it. Yes, could I make an extra $10 a bike by switching vendors, going to China? I won't go to China. We did back in 2006 or 2007. We were chasing the dollar like everybody else, and went and interviewed GT's factory, all these different assembly factories. And there's literally dudes sitting on the dirt floor assembling wheels. And we were like, oh, well, let's give it a try. I brought in bunch of bikes for Christmas. Out of 10 welders, one welder was not doing it right. He was putting the gusset on and welding the head tube. Putting the gusset on, welding the head tube. But normally, you weld it, buff it off, put the gusset on, weld the gusset on. I had over 400, just from the Christmas load, 400 broken frames that I had to replace. And that was, we didn't replace it with the frame they got. We replaced it with the cheater, which was the Center XLT frame, the top end chromoly frame. And if they didn't have an integrated headset, we had to give them a headset. If they had an American bottom bracket, we had to press a mid bottom bracket into it. It almost killed us. I will never do business with that place again. Now, I'm not talking about the frame maker. I'm talking about China.
Right.
That's horrible. I don't care what people say. Look on the bottom of your bike and look at that sticker. If it says China, don't buy it. Period. It's just,
the good stuff is made out of Taiwan now.
There's a reason that $10,000 road bikes come from Taiwan. And you see these carbon frames that are being made there or super high end. And you go in there and it's a clean room. You know, it's not, I mean, there's like positive, it's like you're going into a lab and all the air sucks out and you're wearing like this whole like white suit with covers all over your whole body.
Yeah, like Willy Wonka, like Mike TV.
Yeah, just for them to sticker the bikes. There's a reason that Taiwan compared to China. I've been to both a bunch of times, but I've been to Taiwan a lot more, and I've seen the growth of Taiwan. Used to be every factory you went to was down a dirt road. Today, there's a Starbucks on every other corner, 7-Eleven opposite that, but they sell these like the balut kind of eggs in them and stuff. You know, that's just a little different. You can get ahi tuna just like right there in 7-Eleven. You know, but they have an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They have a minimum wage. They can't force workers to work on weekends. It's just completely different. It's like America. They have pride in their craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that a guy, you know, I wanted to make bikes in America at one time, and there's a couple. Nobody making completes in America. Nobody. If they tell you, oh yeah, fits are made in America, no, they're not. They're made in China. Do you want a guy who is trying to provide for his family, 4 kids, goes to work every day, earns a decent wage, enjoys what he does, and he's welding? It's not some robot. It's actually a guy welding. Or do you want the guy who's like, well, you know what I mean? It's like, I want the guy who is worried about losing his job, not some sucker that's got a year of welding and, you know, and oh yeah, he does ride BMX, but, you know.
Well, I'll tell you, Dave. It's as a former bike shop owner, I did sell stolen bikes, and I always thought they were bitchin' looking. I never had any problems with them. We've been going a long time here, dude, and I couldn't be more thankful for you to take the time to talk to me. I really do appreciate it. And if everybody out there looking to get a bike, definitely look at Stolen. You heard it from the horse's mouth. The care and the planning and the pride that goes into the brand, right, Dave?
Oh yeah, no, we're with having, like, we don't hire a ton of people, but the people that we do hire work hard and we enjoy what we do and we really are detail oriented. And I think that you know,
It comes through.
Yeah, thank you.
It comes through in the product, bro. I appreciate it. Former Marine, former BMX, what a resume. Dave Wooten, you're a man among men. I appreciate your time, buddy.
You too, bud.
All right, man. Take it slow.
All right, take it easy.
Peace out, man.
All right.